Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our City Council meeting. Today is Monday, October 5th, 2020. It's approximately 1 p.m. Before we have our Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to ask you to please rise for a brief moment of silence as we reflect back on the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces as they protect our interests around the globe, as well as the courageous men and women of Las Cruces Police Department and Las Cruces Fire Department as they keep our city safe 24/7, 365. Councilor Sorg, if you join me in the pledge, please.
Yes, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, it gets a little challenging when no one else is, it's the saying it, and you're like, because you're used to, that's okay. Oh yeah, we have our pet of the week. Jennifer Martinez from our communications office is going to introduce our pet. I was interested to see who it is and what their name is.
This is a strange name I've never heard of before, but it kind of sounds kind of cool. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Jennifer Martinez with the city's communications office, and today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Jeffka. Jeffka is a tabby on the prowl for a new family. There are 3 words that describe him: big, orange, and fluffy. His favorite things are love, affection, and attention, I am told in that order. He's looking for a family that loves lazy nights in and cuddling on the sofa. Your family might be the one he is looking for. And if you'd like to meet Jeffka, you can certainly do so at the Animal Service Center of the Mesilla Valley's website. You will be asked to make an appointment to go visit him. Call 382-0018 and make an appointment for Monday through Friday, noon to 6, or Saturday and Sunday, noon to 5. Right now, offsite adoption events are canceled until further notice, but again, you can go to the website, ascmv.org/adoptions. The adoption cost is $25 per pet. You'll look up their animal number, call that phone number to make an appointment to go see the animal. Right now, there are volunteers that are needed. The Animal Service Center is looking for volunteers to help with dog walking, eventually with adoption events, outreach programs, and of course, a lot more. You can contact the volunteer coordinator to find out how you can get involved. Call 382-0018. And as usual, the communications office brings to you a COVID tip. Today, we just have a couple of phone numbers for you if you'd like to jot them down. I always say just take a phone picture because it's just easier to remember that way, and it's in your phone long after our meeting's over. The coronavirus hotline, if you have a health-related question, you can call 855-600-3453. And then if you have non-health questions, like something that has to do with your job or the schools that might be open or closed due to COVID, that would be 1-833-551-0518. And of course, if you'd like more information, you can go to our COVID-19 LosCruces.com website, where you can find a whole bunch of other information located all in one spot. Thank you so much, Mayor. Have a great week.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And our jobs of the week is going to be presented by Darlene. I know you told me, Dr. Payadas, but I was listening to what your doctorate was in. And did you say Darlene was going to be doing the introduction of the jobs of the week?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Actually, Ms. Darlene Lopez is having some troubles in logging in, but I'll present the jobs of the week for you.
Okay.
For today, we have that the City of Las Cruces is hiring, specifically the Public Works Department is hiring a project manager for Public Works Department. This position is going to be closed on October the 12th. Alaska Structures is hiring a mechanist. There's one position open and they haven't opened until filled. There's going to be a position also open for the Crossroads in Home Care Center as a caregiver. This position is going to be open until filled. There's a lead HVAC installer for metal technicians. There's 2 positions for that, and those will be open until filled. And there's also two receptionists and 6 housekeeping staff at Motel 6, and these will be open until filled. And another thing that is going on is that there's going to be a virtual job fair with the New Mexico Workforce Connections on October the 6th at 10 a.m. And the details for that are going to be at employnm.com. For a full list of jobs, internships, and volunteer opportunities, please visit www.employnm.com. and www.governmentjobs.com/careers/Las Cruces. The address for the New Mexico Workforce Connection Center is 226 South Alameda Boulevard in Las Cruces, New Mexico. The phone number is 575-524-6250, and their webpage is employeenm.com, as listed right there. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Payadas. Okay, so next we're going to go to presentation of certificates and/or proclamations, and looks like Councilor Sorg is going to be reading those.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. We have 4 proclamations today. The first one is very appropriate. The New Mexico National Bullying Prevention Month, submitted by Mayor Pro Tem Cassandra Gondara. It reads, whereas bullying is physical, verbal, sexual, or emotional harm, imitation intentionally directed at a person or group of people. Whereas bullying occurs in neighborhoods, playgrounds, schools, and through technology such as internet and cell phones. And whereas various researchers have concluded that bullying is the most common form of violence, affecting millions of American children and adolescents annually. And whereas thousands of New Mexico children and adolescents are affected by bullying annually, and whereas targets of bullying are more likely to acquire physical, emotional, and learning problems, and students who are repeatedly bullied often fear such activities as riding the bus, going to school, and attending community activities. And whereas children who bully are at a greater risk of engaging in more serious violent behaviors, and children who witness bullying often feel less secure, more fearful, and intimidated. Now, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of Las Cruces, New Mexico, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as New Mexico National Bullying Prevention Month, and that New Mexico schools, students, parents, recreation programs, religious institutions, and community organizations be encouraged to engage in a variety of awareness and prevention activities designed to make our communities safer for all children and adolescents. Next is Walk Month, submitted by myself. This one reads, whereas the lives of hundreds of children could be saved each year if communities take steps to make pedestrian safety a priority. And whereas a lack of physical activity plays a leading role in rising rates of obesity, diabetes, and other health problems among children. Being able to walk or bicycle safety in their community offers a opportunity to build activity into daily routine. And whereas driving in private vehicles contributes to traffic congestion and air pollution. And whereas an important role of parents and caregivers is to teach children about pedestrian safety and become aware of the difficulties and dangers that children face each day, and the health and environmental risk related to physical inactivity and air pollution. And whereas community members and leaders should plan to make immediate changes to enable children to safely walk and bicycle in our community, and develop a list of suggestions for improvements that can be done over time. And whereas children, parents, and community leaders around the world are celebrating October as Walk Month and are evaluating walking and bicycling conditions in their communities. Now, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Las Cruces, New Mexico, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as Walk Month, and encourage everyone to consider the safety and health of children today and every day. I'm sure glad I got my walk in this morning before I came here. Now, the next one is about Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. This is presented by or submitted by Mayor Pro Tem Cassandra Gondara. Whereas pregnancy and infant loss is such a common occurrence, one that is usually not recognized. Many Las Cruces and New Mexico parents and families have suffered a miscarriage, a stillbirth, or the death of an infant during delivery or shortly after birth. This devastating tragedy often occurs suddenly, without warning, because of a miscarriage, stillbirth, preterm birth, sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, accident, and other causes or complications. And whereas the City of Las Cruces wishes to acknowledge the profound grief experienced by families who suffer the death of a baby, and wishes to acknowledge the existence of babies and infants that died far too early. And whereas even the shortest lives are still viable, and the grief of those who mourn the loss of these lives should not be trivialized. October 15, 2020 is recognized in parts of the United States and in many other jurisdictions around the world as a day of remembrance and awareness of pregnancy and infant loss. And whereas the tragedy of pregnancy and infant loss, which exacts a terrible emotional control, may be preventable in some instances. Increased awareness of the cause and impacts surrounding pregnancy and infant loss may lead to greater understanding, support, and resources in communities across New Mexico and the United States. And whereas a month of remembrance honors the lives of children taken far too soon and supports grieving parents, grandparents, siblings, and other family members whose lives are forever altered by the heartbreak of losing a child. Those parents and families require support and understanding during times of grief. Promoting awareness of the challenges faced by those parents and families is a positive means of establishing support and understanding. And whereas recognizing Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month would enable the people of Las Cruces to consider how, as individuals and communities, they can meet the needs of bereaved mothers, fathers, and family members, and work to prevent the causes of these deaths. Now, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Las Cruces, New Mexico, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and encourage parents, caregivers, and all residents to become educated in opportunities to prevent pregnancy and infant loss and support bereaved families when prevention is not possible. Next is Hispanic Heritage Month, submitted by Councilor Ivan Flores. Whereas Hispanic Heritage Month is from September 15th through October 15th and was proclaimed by President Ronald Reagan in 1988, the theme for the 2020 is "Be proud of your past, embrace the future," quote unquote. And whereas the United States Hispanic population of 60.6 million is comprised largely of Mexicans, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Salvadorans, Guatemalans, Colombians, Ecuadorians, and Peruvians, which constitutes the largest ethnic group in the United States. And 79% of Hispanics in the United States are US citizens, and Hispanics are the largest growing minority population in the military. And whereas the Hispanic Latino gross domestic product is reported at $2.13 trillion, which is equivalent to the world's 7th largest economy. And whereas Hispanics have contributed to workers' rights with Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, making labor history by breaking the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations Union exclusion of farm laborers and forming the United Farm Workers. And whereas Hispanics have contributed to the performing arts with Luis Valdez 1978 play Zoot Suit, which was the first Chicago play on Broadway. Chicano play, not Chicago. Sorry about that. Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton earned a Tony Award for the Best Musical in 2015, and Rita Moreno, one of the few performers to receive the Peabody, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Awards. Hispanics have contributed to the fine arts, such as John M. Valerie El Indio, 1978, and oh gosh, this is a bad one, Malcares Montoya's Me, holy smoke, Hetron de Mojado, 1983. Hispanics have contributed to literature with Rodolfo Añas, Blessed Me Altima, Denise Chavez, Loving Pedro Infante, and Sandra Cisneros, The House of Mango Street. And whereas Hispanics contribute to science and engineering, Ellen Ochoa was the first Hispanic in the world to fly on NASA's space missions, and Hispanics have contributed to jurisprudence with Sonia Sotomayor's appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Las Cruces, New Mexico, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as Hispanic Heritage Month. End of proclamations.
Very good, Councilor. Just one thing, if you see that word that looks like infant, it's Pedro Infante. So just, yeah, okay. But that's good, very good. Appreciate that. Okay, so now we're going to go to the conflict of interest statement. This is where I ask if any member of the city council, city manager, or any member of city staff has any known conflict of interest on any item on the agenda.
None.
None, Mayor. None.
Okay, and I didn't receive any emails for public participation, so we'll go ahead and I have a closed meeting statement I need to read. Las Cruces City Council met in closed session at 9:01 a.m. on September 28, 2020. The following members were in attendance: Councilors Flores, Sorg, Bencomo, Abeta Stuvi, Gandara, and myself, Ken Miyagishima. Councilor Vasquez came in at 9:46 a.m. Staff present was Robert Cabello, Assistant City Attorney, Jocelyn Garrison, Deputy City Attorney, Jennifer Vega Brown, City Attorney, David Maestas, Advisor to the City Manager, Cody Rogers, Outside Attorney, Tim Hale, Outside Attorney, Carl Conley, Risk Manager, and Miguel Dominguez, Interim Police Chief. Carl Conley and Tim Hale left at 9:20 a.m. They both did. And the meeting adjourned at 10:31 a.m. And for the record, Las Cruces City Council met in closed session and only discussed those limited items as stated in the posted notice. Number one, to discuss pending litigation regarding Warren McCowan versus Mark Morales, number CV-17-902 MLC backspace or hyphen GJF, comma, U.S. District Court, which is closed pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1H, number 7. And number 2, to discuss workers' compensation matter regarding Roy Gardner, claim number 17D36F276431, which is closed pursuant to NMSA 1978 10-15-1H, number 7. Okay, so with that, now we're going to go to acceptance of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Vasquez, second by Councilor Flores, that we accept the agenda as presented. Christine?
This is on the motion to accept the agenda as presented. Councilor Abeyta-Stuvey?
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Me? Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Now I can.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sorg?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gandara?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay, so with that, we move to item 8.1, resolution number 21-058. Need a motion, a second, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
Who's second? Flores?
Flores.
The motion made by Councilor Vasquez, second by Councilor Flores. And looks like Jan Lauterbach will be discussing.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Larry Nichols, for the record, Larry Nichols, Director of Community Development. As stated, agenda item 8.1, resolution 21-058 is a resolution seeking approval between the City of Las Cruces and Terra del Sol Corporation. The development agreement is an effort to address the affordable housing needs for Las Cruces. And with that, Jan Lauterbach, the Community Development Housing Development Coordinator, has a presentation for City Council review. Jan?
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jan Lauterbach with the Community Development Department. And the resolution before you seeks to approve an affordable housing development agreement between the City of Las Cruces and Tierra del Sol Housing Corporation. Background is the parcel that we're talking about is a Sierra Tract parcel that the city acquired from the Las Cruces Public Schools District in exchange for a road improvement agreement. If any of you have been around, been talking about Sierra Tract for a while, the road that was in question was the Bruins Lane Road right south of Mayfield High School. In that agreement between the city and the Las Cruces Public Schools, we did the road for them and they gave us this parcel of land, which stipulated that the use, all or the majority of the use for this parcel of land will be for the creation of affordable housing. And we have a 10-year development deadline. That deadline is up in May of 2023. We have not been sitting around during that 10 years. We've been working on the city's general housing affordable oversight ordinance, the affordable housing plans, the affordable housing land bank and trust fund, all programs to ensure we have the mechanisms in place to begin this project. City staff held public input meetings with surrounding neighbors. We held 2 meetings in August 2018 and 1 in November 2019 to provide information from the neighbors. And out of those meetings came a community blueprint that was done by our planning department and adopted to guide development of the parcel of land. The blueprint had been adopted and approved by planning and zoning in December of 2018 and adopted by City Council in February 2019. This blueprint supports the goals of several city plans like the what is now known as Elevate Las Cruces, the Affordable Housing Plan, our Consolidated Plan, and Strategic Plan, and will provide rental, housing, and homeownership options on the parcel. We went out to RFP, request for proposal was advertised. We had one respondent, which was Tierra del Sol Housing Corporation. They are going to construct 32 affordable housing units in accordance with the Sierra Tract Blueprint, which will include 8 single-family homes, 12 townhomes, and 12 apartment units. Amenities will include a walking path, community garden, and what we'll do is in a future city council meeting, we'll transfer the property to Tierra del Sol through an ordinance, and it will contain a reversionary clause, the details of which will be worked out. Here's a vicinity map of the subject parcel. This is Spruce Street along here. This is Sierra Middle School, and this is Lewis Street running right in here. And give you a little bit closer up. This is what we're talking about doing for the subject parcel. Along the south side will be single-family homes. They'll abut up against the existing neighborhood single-family homes. We'll have the townhomes in the middle of the parcel, and then the multifamily units on the north side of the parcel. There'll be a barrier between there and what is the Sierra Middle School kind of bus drop-off and parking lot. On the east side will contain the community garden, and then a walking path through will allow residents to get to the school and surrounding neighbors to get to the school. This isn't to scale, it's just an idea of how it we'll set it up. And with that, I'll stand for questions. You have your standard council options to approve the agreement, deny it, amend it, or table it. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks, Jan. Before I go to the council, let me, do me a favor. Can you put that map up again where its location?
Yes.
So right next to it, I don't know why I thought Mesquite Valley, the Housing Authority was also doing something, or is this the land?
Just the land.
This is just the land.
No, I mean, Mesquite Valley Housing Authority, I thought they had responded to an RFP a couple years ago, or a year and a half ago, and there was some land that was in that vicinity. Maybe it's the one at the corner. Is the school giving that one away too, or selling that one?
No, sir.
So what? So tell me what happened. I thought I'm almost certain that it even came to council once upon a time, or shared with us the plans with as far as Mesquite Valley Housing Authority. They were going to do some, and it was really targeted for seniors.
Mr. Mayor.
Seniors. Yes, David.
Mr. Mayor, at that time, that was an unsolicited proposal on the same piece of land from the Housing Authority, but staff was concerned because we had not done a public input process. So they were proposing a large apartment complex on it. And so we undertook the blueprint effort, and then the Housing Authority was given the opportunity to submit at the same time Tierra del Sol did for their RFP. And so we did not accept their proposal.
Okay. All right. Well, that clarified that. Councilor Sorg, and then Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, David.
Come on. Okay. I'm so pleased that we're moving forward on this. I remember it well when we first acquired the land. And I'm looking forward to having a nice subdivision there that looks nice and very convenient for so many people. The one thing I would insist on having in the plan is connections to the school, where every student that is going to school at Sierra Middle School can walk to the school. Nothing could be nicer for the students. So, and in line with our walk month, this is something we need to have as a note that the plans include a walk path to the school Okay, and maybe a shortcut, so they don't have to go all the way out to Spruce Avenue. Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate this. I too am really excited about the opportunities. Jan, you had been mentioning you had 2 public comment opportunities. Can you tell me how many people participated and generally what were people's comments about that, and how did you incorporate that into what we see currently in terms of the project?
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Gondra, we had approximately 20 people attend each public meeting that we had. They all gave their ideas. They looked at different housing types, what they wanted to see there. Some didn't want any housing there. They wanted it to be raw land forever and ever. But we took their comments and incorporated them into the blueprint that was done by the planning staff.
Okay, thank you. And Jan, in terms of the need for affordable housing, can you talk to us about just defining affordable housing, what our need looks like specifically, anything that the council and the public would need to know about what our need is currently?
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Gondra, sure. Affordable housing in a general sense means that your housing expenses should not exceed 30% of your gross income, your monthly housing expenses. And that's what we talk about, 30% of our monthly housing expenses. Some people get confused with low-income housing. Low-income housing is based upon your income levels for your family size. But affordable is, in a general sense, is the 30% of your income. The last consolidated plan that the city had done, which was a 2016 to 2020 consolidated plan, identified a shortage of approximately 4,800 rental units to serve the lowest households, up to 60% of area median income. In that same plan, it also identified approximately 4,600 potential households that could purchase homes, of which for that same income level, only about 545 homes existed at that point in time. And those purchasing those homes would need subsidies, as well as the rentals would need subsidies to afford the units for the available rental. So we have a big shortage. We are due to update our consolidated plan. We have a consultant out right now, so that new plan will be coming out next year with those figures updated.
So Jen, you mentioned the income level. Can you give us an idea of what that is?
Sure. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem Gondra, right now, the income level for a family of 4 in order to purchase one of these homes would not exceed $43,900. And it varies by the household size, but that is for a family of 4.
Okay, thank you, Jan. So will Tierra del Sol be responsible for any road development, anything like that? Would they have to add add any roads?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Gondra, Tierra del Sol will be responsible for the entire development, including infrastructure.
So what infrastructure, Jan, are you speaking to?
So on this picture that's up right now, the road coming off Lewis Street, coming off Lewis Street, they'll be responsible for putting in that road, along with all the utility connections, street lights, that type of infrastructure.
And that's included in, they're aware of that and they have factored that in terms of the total amount required to get this done?
Yes, Councilor, Mayor Pro Tem, excuse me.
Okay, it's okay. Thank you. And are we at that point in terms of the total amount or?
Mayor Pro Tem Councilor Gondeta, sorry. Tierra del Sol in their original RFP submitted estimated cost about a little over $3.2 million. I did talk to Tierra del Sol as of last week, and due to COVID, construction materials have gone up approximately 10 to 15%.
So so when you say that, Jan, will be in addition to the 3.2 million?
That's correct.
Okay,
Mayor Pro Tem, looks like Natalie Green wants to jump in and make a comment.
okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Natalie Green with Community Development. Just for the record, Mayor Pro Tem, there is not an exchange of funding. We, at a future time, will donate the property to Tierra del Sol, and in turn, they will seek and secure the financing to create the development. So there is no exchange of money from the city to Tierra del Sol.
Okay, we're not going to be using the land trust bank funding, anything like that to assist them. They will be completely responsible for the 3.2 or whatever the total will be.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gondeta, they have the right to apply for funding with us. They have not. They've identified some other funding sources that they intend to use. So Jan may have those available. If not, I believe Tierra del Sol is on the line if you have more specific questions. But at this time, we do not anticipate using city funds.
Okay. Jan, do you have any additional information regarding the possible funding sources?
Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem Gondeta, I'd like to defer to Tierra del Sol. I do not know them off the top of my head. I know one of them is SHOP Funds, which is Self-Help Opportunity Program. And then they have some private loans, but I believe Tierra del Sol is on the line. They could answer.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. This is Art Marujo with Tierra del Sol Housing. How are you all today?
Good.
Good, thank you.
Good. I'm sorry I wasn't able to just zoom in. I had to call in, but been hearing the conversation. As far as the financing is concerned for this development, we are using SHOP funding, which is an allocation from HUD. And what it provides the financing for the acquisition and the infrastructure of the development. Those funds are later given to the family as a grant due on sale if we choose to, and that's based on affordability. Other financing that we are looking into is NeighborWorks Capital with NeighborWorks America, and we have also reached out to New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority and their Primero Loan Fund.
Thank you, Art.
We also have secured financing with local private lenders as well.
Okay. I appreciate that. That gives me a really good sense, private lenders. And when do we plan on starting this project? Do we have a time frame?
As of right now, what we're looking at, once we sign the development, if you approve the development agreement, we do have our engineers on standby. That'd be Mr. Larry Underwood. We do have preliminary sketches of the subdivision itself. And once we agree and the development agreement is approved, we will have Larry finalize the documents and the drawings and submit to planning for approval. We anticipate planning to take anywhere from 30 to 90 days. I don't know how the department is being affected by COVID right now. We do ask that if planning can, being that there is a time limit on the use of doing this development here, if planning can provide us some guidance and be along the way with us, so that way we don't miss the beat, and that way we hopefully can start turning dirt, shooting for February of 2021.
Okay,
Looks
okay.
like, Mayor Pro Tem, looks like Larry Nichols has a comment.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the record, Larry Nichols. Mayor Pro Tem and the Terra del Sol folks, the planning review will not be an obstacle for you. Although we are in the midst of the pandemic, we have been able to meet the for subdivisions such as this, and so we'll be, as the council is, be very appreciative of your wanting to get this project started, and we'll make every effort to do that.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. Thank you, Art, for the information. I'm excited. It's really something that we need, and I would agree with with Councilor Sorg about the walking past the connections, shortcut, if you will, to the schools. I think would be an exceptional idea, and it sounds like that's something that staff and Tierra del Sol have considered. So really looking forward to seeing more. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Bencomo?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, that's so weird. Okay. Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation, and thanks for Tierra del Sol for being on. I just have a couple clarifying questions. So this RFP was open to any developer, not just developers that focus on affordable housing?
Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. How many properties like this, or how many projects like this does the city have going on where we own the land and have RFPs for people for developers who can build affordable housing in the city?
Mr. Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, this is our first project with land in the Affordable Housing Land Bank and Trust Fund, so it's pretty exciting to see it finally get to this stage, and will be even more exciting when we get it built. But we do have a couple projects in the future with the NAT team identifying the nuisance properties. We can get some of those nuisance properties into our land bank and work on getting those developed.
That's wonderful. Perhaps this is something that we can discuss in our housing PRC. As the chair, I would love to hear more about this trust and see how we can expand on properties like this. Honestly, I'm really excited that Tierra del Sol, obviously they're a big champion of this, and I'm like, this is such a big deal, and so I'd love to see this grow, and I'd love to see other properties come to us in the next couple of years to really sort of try to catch up with this growing need that we have in the city. But those were all my questions. Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? So let me just ask Councilor Flores, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jan and Larry, and thank you also, Mayor Pro Tem, for your questions, and Councilor Bencomo. It's really interesting because what I would like to know is, how is it that the city then gives the land? Is that what I understood? If the city owns it now, but once Tierra del Sol builds, how does that work? What part of the anti-donation clauses, why doesn't it apply?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, David.
This is David Dahlon for the record. Mayor and Councilor Flores, affordable housing is one of the few exceptions to the anti-donation clause, as well as LEDA under economic development. Those are the two main exceptions. Thank you.
Okay. Would that apply to, Mr. Dollahan, would that apply to low income? Or is there a big distinction between low income?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, I'll defer to Jan, but it's working toward affordable housing. So as long as we can work for not exceeding 30% of a family's household income toward their housing expense, but I also believe that we can go up to 120% of area median income, adjusted for family size. So
Would then, Mr. Dollahan, would that mean that low income people could possibly buy also?
yes, and that's who Tarot also primarily targets, and they do a lot of self-help.
Ah, I see, I see. Thank you, Mr. Dollahan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay, so Jan or David Dallahan, just curious, there were neighborhood meetings, right? That were held back in 2018. I don't suppose you remember what those meetings were, but I recall giving a report on those because residents were of the impression this was going to be for seniors. And what's interesting about seniors is it's a double. Not only are they lower income, but we're struggling to find places to live. Don't get me wrong, Tierra del Sol does a great job. I've always been supportive of them, and I'm sure they're going to do a great job here. I'm not going to be supporting this only because of the fact I was of the impression it was going to. I was wondering why it hadn't taken place, but seniors are having to live on such limited income that they are having to be given so many different places that just aren't. That they should. And I need to find what I want because it for flip. You have that.
Many cohorts that needed assistance, seniors being one of them. But it wasn't, at the end of the day, if I recall, it was not specific to senior living. Now seniors could be a part of that, obviously, a part of coming in as a, being considered, if you will, at the end when if all the units are developed. But I don't remember it only being discussed as senior living. That was never the thought from the beginning. Now, it could be that as the dialogue occurred, the people, like I said, asked, what about seniors? Could they be incorporated, kind of thing. I know notes were taken as well, but at the end of the day, that was not my recollection of it only being senior living.
Well, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I know that the renditions exist, so I've seen them. I mean, because what was interesting about them is the buffers that were provided, and the residents felt, okay, well, it's seniors, because you know how residents are when it's going to be mixed families, they're going to say, oh, well, the kids are going to be running through my yard. They're going to do all this stuff here. Oh, and they thought it was seniors, and it was a little bit easier. But I remember seeing them, and the houses weren't facing the street, the back of the houses. So that's okay. We'll deal with it another time. I understand, but I just, anyways. Okay, doesn't look like there's any more comments or questions. So with that, Christine?
This is on the motion to approve Resolution 21-058. Councilor Beta-Stevie?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Councilor Sorg?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gondara?
Yes.
Mayor?
No. Okay, so now we're going to go to 8.2, Resolution 21-059. Need a motion and a second?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion made by Councilor Sorg. Who did the second?
Sorg.
Okay.
Oh, second, Betas too.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, motion made by Councilor Sorg, second by Councilor Beta-Stevie. Looks like Matt Sines will be presenting.
It's great to see everyone today. Let me share my screen with y'all. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, Mayor, members of Council, Administration. For the record, my name is Matthew Sines, Senior Budget Analyst with the Budget Office, and I'm here today to present the proposed budget adjustments for fiscal year 2021. So with these adjustments, there are no new programs or policy initiatives. The adjustments are focused on compliance and alignment. We have a couple requests from the general fund expenditures that we'll take a look at, but our main focus is budgeting for the phase 2 of the 2020 general obligation bonds. Again, these are for the voter approved projects for the parks and sports field improvements, new animal shelter, fire station number 3 replacement, and recreational trails. So once we had a chance to review the amendments, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Interim Public Works Director, Mr. David Cedillo, to discuss the capital improvement program. As always, we're striving to apply best practice. Now, before we get started, I just want to point out that the amounts we are requesting today are located in the column with yellow text. Also, we're letting you know what type of transaction we are processing with the letter that follows the amount. So those letters stand for E for expense, R for revenue, and T for transfer. So let's go ahead and get started. So from the general fund, economic development is looking to close out the Royal Crossing TID by budgeting revenues of $38,523. This is for a reimbursement from the Goldenrod. They're also carrying over $26,000 in remaining expenditures for their bond consulting. Also on the general fund, fire is requesting a total of $31,000, which $25,000 is for EMT licensing. They also had a grant extension for the Assistance to Firefighters grant in the amount of $6,000. Fund 1500, Mayor and Council, we are budgeting $400,000 for administration fees for the FY21 Hold Harmless GRT. Fund 1500, Economic Development is transferring budget as well as expenditures of $137,000 to Fund 5010. Recently, the airport was reclassified as an enterprise fund, so we are transferring over those capital projects. Fund 2100, Parks and Recreation is adjusting their juvenile citation program grants to actuals by reducing both revenues and expenditures by $20. Our budgeted amount was $20 higher than the actual award amount, so we're bringing that back down. Fund 2303, Fire, is requesting to budget revenues and expenditures of $10,000 for an additional amount received from the Emergency Medical Service Grant. Fund 2700, Community Development, is transferring $35,000 to Human Resources. This is within the same fund. However, according to our charter, we do need council's approval when we are transferring from department to department. So this allocation was originally part of Resolution 20-138 for COVID emergency assistance, and the funding will be used for COVID-19 rapid tests. Fund 2705, Treasury Services, is requesting the budget revenues of $51,000 for principal and interest that will be earned from the La Piñon lease. Fund 3510, Treasury Services, is looking to budget the phase 2 of the 2020 general obligation bonds. So we are budgeting revenue for the bond premiums and property taxes of $1.9 million. And we're also budgeting for bond interest expense as well as administrative expenditures of $305,000. Fund 4230, Public Works, is budgeting for the bond proceeds, bond issuance costs, and bond projects totaling $17.9 million. Again, these are for the voter-approved park improvements, which will total $10.4 million. Animal shelter, $3.4 million. Fire station number 3, $2 million. Trail improvements at $1.5 million. In just a moment, Mr. Cedillo will have a breakdown for you all so you can see it visually. Fund 4271, Economic Development, is carrying over $135,000 for the TID two-way conversion. So this project is actually completed. However, we are pending the final invoicing on that. Fund 4505, Economic Development, is adjusting their capital projects to actuals for by $33,784 for the airport and downtown improvements. Lastly, Fund 5920, Quality of Life, is requesting a budget, a total of $93,000, which $35,000 is for the COVID-19 barriers for the bus drivers, and also $58,000 for the South Central Regional Transit District membership. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Cedillo to discuss the CIP.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. David Cedillo, Interim Public Works Director, for the record, and I will be going over those CIP amendments with you this afternoon.
Hey, David, can you speak up just a little bit, please? Sound a little bit muffled.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
How's that?
A lot better.
Excellent. Okay. Everyone can hear me now. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself again in case it was low on the recording. David Cedillo, Interim Public Works Director, and I'll be going over the CIP amendments with you this afternoon. First, we have the traffic signal, and we're revising it to align with the CIP format. That revision basically puts all the amounts for those 2 traffic signals into one amount. So that just aligns with the format of our document. Next, as Mr. Sines had noted, we have a carryover increase for the downtown two-way conversion project in the amount of $135,098. Also, we are increasing and including into the CIP document the amounts for the second half sale of the GO bond projects. And I will read each one for the record by question and amount. So for GO bond question number 1, which is the parks and sports fields improvements and additions, that has an increase of $10,408,910. GO bond question number 2, which is related to the new animal shelter facility, will have an increase of $3,696,530. The fire station number 3, which is the GO bond question number 3, will have an increase of $2,043,020. Lastly, we have GO bond question number 4, which is the walking, jogging, biking trails improvements and additions. That increase to the document is $1,451,540. Next, we have the Rio Grande energy efficiency improvements. And again, we're revising that to align with the CIP document. This is to fix the portion when it first came over, should have had a name change, and that's what we're correcting at this time in the document. The Las Cruces runway 826 extension, we're also revising that to match the actual amount that was in budget. We had a typo. The budget was correct, but the reported amount on the CIP was off. So we're bringing this to correct that at this time. Next, we have the downtown plaza shade structures. That has a carryover increase of $10,981. Moving along, for the Las Cruces Airport infrastructure improvements, this has a carryover increase of $3,573. The next item, which is the Las Cruces Airport GA Terminal Apron design, this again is to correct a typo and revise it to match the budget of $9,742. The next project, still at the Las Cruces Airport, for the wildlife perimeter fence, has a carryover increase of $19,150. The next three are also to correct the items on the CIP document as well. The wastewater utility bonds projects FY 2021 and the water utilities bond projects FY 2021 are being revised to match the budgeted amount, which were typos on the CIP. And lastly, the fiber optic replacement from JU to Roundtree. This is to align with the CIP formatting. If you recall at the last meeting that we had, the budget was moved over to those utility programs. However, what was not transferred to the CIP document was listing those amounts and identifying the project as the fiber optic cable replacement for that portion in those programs. And with that, here are council's options, and both Mr. Sines and I are available for any questions.
Thanks, David.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we got Councilor Flores, Dooley, Sorg. And someone, if you can mute your phone, please. You're not speaking.
Mayor. Someone still has a so this question is either for Mr. Cedillo or for Mr. Sines. Mr. Cedillo, you, for example, did explain why there was an adjustment at one point, and that had to do because of typos. But it would make a lot more sense to me to have an explanation. And typos, I think, are frankly a little scary for me when it comes to numbers like this, and because of not only accounting but accountability. If you could explain why, for example, I think what really raised my interest was there was Fund 4271 regarding the final financing regarding TID. I need to know which TID that is. And then prior to that, I think it was slide, it must have been slide 4, maybe 5. There was a specific, 3. We could go to 3, slide 3. Economic Development Fund 1000 requested adjustment of yada, yada, blah, blah. And the reason for request was that the Royal Crossing TID closed. Now, if you could explain what the quote close means and why that fund, why that money was spent on that. I don't know anything about the process, and I think it would make a lot more sense, well, to me, why that money was allocated, why, and when you say that the adjusted budget, is that a plus or a minus or what? What does that all mean?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, thank you for the question. So the Royal Crossing TID, as you know, did not proceed as presented. So they were expecting a reimbursement, as I mentioned, from Goldenrod, which is a $38,523. There were some associated costs with the project of $26,000. I will have to defer the question to Dr. Martinez for further explanation on the details of that. But it looks like everything that was being charged is being paid by Goldenrod.
So, wait a minute.
So there was some consulting services for the TID project, for the tax incremental development district.
The city had a consulting service regarding the Royal Crossings TID project. Is that what I understood?
Yes, I will defer the question to Dr. Martinez to
Yes.
provide the further details on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sines. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. This is Griselda Martinez for the record, Economic Development Director. Councilor Flores, so as we were working through the details on the Royal Crossing application, one of the hired consultants we had as the city to help us evaluate this project was Legal Services specialized in TIDs. And so part of the application was an agreement that those costs incurred would be paid by the developer requesting this TID. And so what you see before you are the expenses incurred through legal fees that we have invoiced the developer. And so this is an accounting for us to have an account in which we are receiving the payment that have been invoiced to the developer.
So was the amount invoiced to a developer $38,523, or was it 20?
So the expenses invoiced to the developer were the actual expenses that we received via invoice from the legal consultants.
Which was 25,564, or does the R stand for reimbursement and the E stand for expenses?
Yes, ma'am. One is one is revenue, and the E is expenses. And so those are the two. One invoice was paid in our previous fiscal year, and so that's why the difference you see between the 38 and the 25,000. So the total in invoices is 38,523 that has been invoiced to the developer.
So, Dr. Martinez, does that mean that in the process of going through this application or getting getting a potential contract, the city incurred expenses in the amount of $25,564?
No, Mayor Councilor Flores. So we actually had a $25,000 application fee. That was the initial payment of or revenue we received from the developer for us to process the application. That was internal to the city. The second component is the actual fees that we hired to support the processing of this application. So for these specific ones, it's a total of 38,523, and that's the revenue. So it's in the accounting practice, we're basically increasing the budget. So we have, when we receive the payment from the developer, it will zero out revenues minus expenses.
I guess I still don't get it, because if you're expecting $25,000 from the Royal Crossing people, and we expended 38,000 plus, that would still be a little around $13,000 difference.
Actually, is the opposite, Councilor Flores. So the revenue is what we have invoiced. The $13,000 is an invoice we paid in advance before the end of this fiscal year. So we did not invoice the developer that $13,000 that we already paid. We invoiced the bulk of the 13 plus the 25.
Okie dokie. And then as far as Fund 4271, if we could go to, I think it's slide 6 or 7, slide, I don't know what slide it is, but if we could go to, yes, there it is. So that $135,098, which, is that the TID, the downtown TID, or because it's a two-way conversion or whatever? Can you, someone explain that, please?
Mayor, Council Flores, yes, this is the two-way conversion. Griselda, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Matt. Griselda Martinez for the record. Mayor, Councilor Flores, council members, Councilor Flores. So currently we only have our public TID. And so this is our downtown TID and for the projects in downtown, correct?
Great, good. Okay, thank you, thank you. And now the 5920 quality of life, COVID barriers and SCRTD, so that's a South Central Rapid Transit District. What funding was allocated? Was it 92,000? And COVID barriers, can someone explain what that was?
So Mayor, Council Flores, the amount that was allocated to the COVID barriers was 35,000. And I believe it's the plexiglass that is provided for the protection of the drivers. And so the total was 35,000, and it was for the fabrication and installation of those.
Okay, so why does it say 92,000?
So, okay, so this expenditure is for two things. It's for the COVID barriers, and also they're requesting additional funding for the South Central Regional Transit District membership on that. And that one was 58,000.
That's our membership, what, fee?
Yes, ma'am.
So on their books, on the SCRTD, $92,000 should be reflected there as money coming from the city. I mean, different line items or whatever it is that you accountants call it, but should $92,000 be on their books?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, no, ma'am. So we combined two requests into one amount since it was under the same fund, 5920. So we have two different amounts. So the 35 is for the COVID barrier, has nothing to do with the South Central Regional Transit District membership. So that's a separate item. They're paying 58,000 for that one item by itself. So the two items together total $92,826.
You see, it would make a lot of difference to me to see that broken up, and I'll tell you why. Because I sit on that board, and right now, we're asking questions about some accounting practices there. So, and I'm not sure that, you really have to be an accountant to understand all of this. And suffice to say that it's public record now. So I can disclose this, that SCRTD, their accounting ledgers for 2 years, for 1 year, last year, went up to the auditor, to Mr. Colon's office. And there were some irregularities, and we're expecting to see more. So, we'll be, so I'm just, it would, for me, it would just be, I guess, when we're seeing this, and a lot of us sit on different boards where we're probably reviewing their expenditures and that sort of stuff. It would be very helpful, and I don't know if that's, if that in any way upset, I don't know what the correct word is, but if it just throws a wrench into your accounting procedures or your best, there's accounting principles that you have to abide by, and understand that, and I respect it. But if there's any possibility of having this broken up, so for those of us who sit on other boards can then come back to, say, your department and say, why does it show that? Because maybe, here it shows 92, but we're only paying 58 to be a member of that district. Anyway, I'm just bringing that up, and I don't know if that kind of clarity could be shown in your accounting practices, but it would be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Spence.
Mayor, Councilor Flores, sure, we can break this out for you in the future.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for all of us because, even though I know that we're all viewed as being highly intelligent and highly well-versed in everything, I'm saying that facetiously. Well, not entirely, but we're not, you know, I mean, all of us have different backgrounds, and the one that comes closest to understanding all of this is the mayor. And that's because, you know, he's the smartest guy. That's why he's the mayor. But the rest of us aren't. I know, I wasn't even, I think I've shared that I took accounting for lawyers in law school, and man, it was no fun at all. So, and then because we are basically the fiscal stewards of the city, we really have to understand what's going on. And then being on boards, you know, we have fiscal liability there too. So that would be helpful. And thank you again, Mr. Sines. And thank you, Dr. Martinez and Mr. Cedillo. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for those kind comments, Councilor. I don't know if your steak and lobster lunch has shown up yet, but it should be there.
Not, you know, I keep saying not even a peanut butter and jelly. Well, make it strawberry jam, but not even that has shown up. I don't think any other counselor has received anything either, but they don't bellyache as much as I do. But thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Abeta-Stubbe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Matthew and David. I have a question on slides 2700. Do we have the cost of what it is per rapid test right now, what we're paying for those tests?
Mayor, Councilor Stubbe, I will defer the question to Human Resources Director Joe Richards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I don't have that number here in front of me, but we are waiting for an invoice from WorkMed right now. We know we have some employees that have been tested, so I can get that information back to you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure it's been said before, but just to clarify, when one of our employees goes in to get this test, there's no copay or any sort of out-of-pocket charges up front for any of those tests, correct?
Mayor, councilors, that is correct.
Great, thank you. And this is more of just a commentary as we're seeing these line item budgets for the GO bonds. I think that it would be nice to get a full review of where we're at on all of these projects as well. Make sure that we're staying on track and on target for their completion. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilor Sorg.
Thank all of you. And Mayor, on the CIP, and probably slide 7 is be better demonstrate this than 6 is, but almost all of them are about the same here. Do you have these increases like number 5 there, downtown plaza shade structures, $10,981 increase for carryover adjustment. Just explain briefly where the money is moved from and where does it go to, and in this case, why? A carryover adjustment doesn't make any sense to me. In other words, make that make sense to me, Mr. Sines, perhaps, or somebody else.
Mayor, Councilor Sorg, I'm sorry, can you state your question one more time?
Yeah, I'm using downtown plaza shade structures as an example. And there's several of these, what you call increase or for carryover adjustment. I don't understand the meaning of carryover adjustment. Where does the money come from? Where does it go to?
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Councilor Sorg. So a carryover adjustment is a project that was budgeted for FY20. So typically in your your budget process, you're anticipating and forecasting out where you think you might end up. So in this case, they thought they would spend more money in FY20 than they actually did. So therefore, their FY21 budget was lower than they needed to be where they ended. So that's why they have to increase their budget for that carryover. So a carryover is just simply carrying over from one year to another.
Okay, that makes sense. But, so there was an extra $10,981 in the FY20 budget. And for the 21 budget, you need to increase it, that amount in order to cover the expense of a potential shade structure downtown Plaza. Is that kind of explains it also?
Yes, sir. So FY20's budget ended up being $10,981 lower than anticipated. So when in their forecasting, they were thinking they were going to spend more in FY20 than they actually did. So therefore, it was decreasing their FY20 original forecasted budget. So this allows them to put their budget where it actually should be and where they ended.
Okay.
And Councilor Sorg, looks like Dr. Martinez wants to make a quick comment.
Yes, Mayor, City Council members, just to clarify further, Councilor Sorg, the shaded structures for the plaza, we have a project number in which we have the specific funding for this project allocated. So when we're giving over, we're just making sure that the unspent funds from last fiscal year is carried on to the project for fiscal year 2020. So for us to make sure that the unspent money it's contained in the project for this fiscal year and funds that are available.
Yeah, okay, that's starting to make sense. Okay, I'm satisfied. That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem. Oh, wait a minute. Looks like Joe Richards wants to make a comment. Joe?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, councilors, just to circle back to the rapid tests, those are $69 per test.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. Some of my questions are similar in terms of what was asked before, in terms of just a little more specifics. And I'm asking more specifically for the traffic signal on slide 6. What traffic signal and how much is it? And you're just...
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, David's interim public works director. So the traffic signals are those that were approved and put onto the CIP from the bonds. I believe they were from our SSGRT bonds. Now, when they were listed on the CIP, they were listed with the totals per location, which were Sonoma Ranch and North Rise, and then Roadrunner Parkway and Sonora Springs. So our typical format for that is we combine the cost and just report it as one total amount. This is just to correct that. We had them listed individually.
Okay, so you're saying that as it comes to us, they'll be listed together?
The dollar amount for that line item will be the total, but you have those listed out below there, identified in bullet points. And you can see that on page 1 of the CIP.
Yeah, okay. Okay, but when you're presenting this, it'd be important to maybe bullet it so that we have an understanding of what traffic signals you are speaking to, because the public is watching, they ask specifically. It's really hard for us to carry. I mean, this is what you do all the time. This is not what we do all the time. So it'd be helpful to have very distinct bullets to say the traffic signals are for this particular one. My next question is around the downtown two-way conversion. I was hoping that Councilor Flores would ask a little more detail. 135,098 increased carryover from the final payment. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is we have now received the invoice and we're getting ready to pay that amount, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to be sure. And the increase, the $10,981 amount, from where to where is that going? I've had similar. Sorry.
Mayor Gandara, for that one,
no.
for that, I will go ahead and ask Dr. Martinez to elaborate on the specifics for that project.
Okay.
Mayor, Councilor, council members, Mayor Pro Tem, would you please repeat that question?
Yeah, there was somewhere in the slide, I'm sorry I didn't put the slide number, but mention of a $10,981,000 increase. I didn't know from where it's at to where it's going to, or where did you get the money to do that? Sorry.
Is that, Mayor Pro Tem, is that in reference to the downtown shade structures?
There you go, yes,
Okay. So when we are preparing the closeout for fiscal years, we have a projected amount that we are expecting to spend. So that's done 3 to 5 months prior to the closing of the fiscal year. So as we close the fiscal year, in this particular instance, we plan to spend $10,000 more than the actuals. So the unspent $10,000 now, we are carrying it over from last fiscal year to this fiscal year. So as I mentioned before, this is just to make sure that the unspent amount still in place for the in the right project for this fiscal year.
So it goes into obviously your line item, Economic Development Department. And so whatever is there currently, we should see an addition of $10,981,000, correct?
That is correct, Mayor Pro Tem. We actually have a project number, which is specific to the Plaza Shade structures. So that project for this fiscal year will have that increase. You are correct.
Okay, and what's the total that we're working with, Dr. Martinez, related to the downtown Plaza Shade structure?
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't have the specific number. I believe it was 150, the initial budgeted amount. I will have to get back to you with the specific numbers.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Thank you, Mayor, Matt, David.
So Mayor Pro Tem, you remember you're talking about the downtown shade structure that we recently kind of moved forward, the full amount or just the budgeted amount that?
No, the full amount.
I think it was like $1 million, wasn't it? That's the one that was the 4 pieces. It looked really nice. I mean, it looks like it matches the stage. If that's the one you're talking about, yeah, that one's at least $1 million.
That particular one, Mayor, but I think it exceeds the amount that was budgeted.
Oh yeah, it did. What we had in the TID money, we're having. Right. In fact, that's probably we're having to take some money from some others to add to it to make that $1 million.
Got it. Well, I don't know I don't know that that's what their staff is doing at this point, right?
Oh, I don't know. I was just telling you the full amount on that price there.
Right.
Dr. Martinez, you were going to say something?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. So just to clarify, when we first started with the Plaza shaded structures, we allocated from general fund a specific amount, and I believe that's the amount Mayor Pro Tem is asking for. We have incurred in some expenses for the design that you, Mayor, you're referring to. And so that's the pool of money that we have been using to do consulting work to get us to the concept designs that you saw recently in a work session. But I will get that original amount and the available funds up to date, Mayor Pro Tem, for you.
I appreciate that, Dr. Martinez. Yeah, I would like to know because I think we're going to have to start working towards figuring out where we're going to get that funding. And I'm still advocating for solar. Solar would be nice. And an art structure, incorporating art. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor, or David Cedillo, did you have something else you wanted to say? Oh, no. Okay, Councilor Flores, do you have a comment?
No, sorry.
Forgot to put your hand down? Okay.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing further, Christine?
This is on the motion to approve Resolution 21-059. Councilor Beta Stevie?
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Sorg?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gondara?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay, item 8.3, Resolution 21-060. Need a motion and a second, please.
Move to approve.
I'll
Second.
second.
Who was the second?
It was Gabe Vasquez.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Councilor Sorg, second by Councilor Vasquez, and looks like Lisa LaRocque will discuss. You there, Lisa? You're still muted.
There you go. I'm sorry. It's it only happens when I present. Otherwise, I'm very capable. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right, one down. So good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and staff and other guests. My name is Lisa LaRocque. I am the Sustainability Officer for the City of Las Cruces, and I will present today about the Las Cruces Climate Action Plan. The planet is an amazing system of cycles and feedback loops, and when we experience shocks or stressors, it indicates system failures. And climate change thickens the blanket of carbon in the atmosphere, which increases heat, energy, and triggers all sorts of changes. And in this region, our shocks and stressors include extreme heat, drought, dust, fire, and floods. This graph illustrates that we are already experiencing some.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
the
Councilor Sorg?
slides are not moving forward.
Well, they're not?
Thank you. Yeah, they're not. I was just going to say something too. Thanks, Gil. I thought it was just my screen, but no, thanks.
I suggest you hit F5.
Counselor, F5.
I ordered a t-shirt for you, Councilor Sorg. It says F5 on there. Just want you to know that. I mean, yeah.
Goodness my, oh my goodness.
Lisa, I'd recommend just stop sharing and then share again and then select the screen that shows full on your computer.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. Okay. Okay, how's that? Do you see the whole screen?
Yeah, we get our reading glasses, we can see it.
All right. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
It's okay, we can see. It's small, but it's okay. It's good. Let's try it. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
I'm unclear on why it's so temperamental for me. Jeez. Could you bear with me a second so I can make sure that I'm showing you the best screen possible? I'm sorry for the delay. I really am.
No problem.
Is that still small?
Oh, that's good. That's a lot better. If you can get it to work, then we're good.
How about now? Do you see a change in the slides?
No. Well, you're still on the very first one. Why don't you go to the next one? The shocks and stressors.
Yes, shocks and stressors.
Yeah, but it's, well, can you go to that one because it's still on the first slide?
Could I'm very sorry. Could I ask someone, like David Dallahan, can you, or someone could, you or Adrian pull up the slideshow and I'll just tell you to advance. I don't know why it's misbehaving.
Mayor, council, I'm working on it. This is David Allen.
Okay.
I have 3 screens up and it just, it gets very temperamental about jumping.
Lisa, if you would stop sharing your screen.
Okay. I'm sorry. Jeez, definitely know what I'm doing after work.
Mayor, it's opening for me, but it's a little slow.
Okay.
Weather's getting nice.
What's that?
I said the weather's getting nicer.
I was going to ask, well, yeah, where David's at in San Francisco, it looks pretty nice.
Sorry.
Hey, Councilor Sorg, so I'm able to, remember how you had the city hall as your background? So
Yes.
I'm able to figure out how to do that now. So I have one.
Okay.
On those rare times that I'm at home and I need to do a Zoom, like on the weekends, and I don't want to come to the office, so I got a picture of the organs that looks pretty cool. So
Yes.
so thanks for trying to help me, even though you really didn't, but just made me figure it out. So
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, David.
I'm just kidding.
And Lisa, what slide do you want me on?
The second one, please. And if you could do it as a show as opposed to a just a slide in normal. Not, sorry, I keep asking you for more.
Is that it?
Yes.
Like that?
Okay, the second slide. All right, so I did tell you about the different shocks and stressors, and I apologize. Thank you very much. Like Councilor Gonda said, we all need lessons in different areas, and mine is clearly getting Zoom to work for me. So if we can move to to the third slide. So this graph illustrates that the difference between climate and weather. Weather is always variable. We see ups and downs all the times and expect it. So if we were to talk about climate, the trend, we would imagine that it would be a horizontal line. Can you hit return for me, David? But what really happens is that with climate change, the trend is actually going up. So things are becoming more extreme, and our climate and overall patterns are changing. Next slide. This graph illustrates we are already experiencing a symptom of climate change, extreme heat, and it is projected to rise. The horizontal axis, the x-axis, tracks years from 1950 to 2100. The vertical or y-axis shows the number of weeks we have or project to experience extreme heat in the next 75 years. Extreme temperatures are described as over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in yellow or over 105 degrees in red. This year, we experienced 5 weeks of extreme heat. 3+ weeks of that were over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in yellow, and an additional 9 days were over 105 degrees Fahrenheit in red. By 2050, we project that 7 weeks, almost 2 months of extreme heat, with 3 weeks of those being with temperatures over 105. And by the end of the century, 3 months of our summers, our whole summer actually, are projected to be over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with almost 2 of those months being over 105 degrees Fahrenheit. We will have temperatures similar to Phoenix, but will we have the appropriate infrastructure? These temperatures projections will severely impact old, young, those with chronic illnesses, those without homes, outside worker, athletes, or travelers on foot and bike. Next slide, please. Extreme heat can also be felt inside the house. 42% of the infill area is made up of homes that are constructed before 1970. Many of these homes are made of cinder block, are poorly insulated with single pane windows, and have the potential of asbestos. These homes rely on evaporative coolers that can only reduce home temperatures, whoopsie, you're sneaking ahead, by approximately 10 degrees when humidity during the monsoon season is over 35%. In other words, our 107-degree days, heat events like this summer, will probably mean that the homes inside are in the high 90s. Seniors, young adults, and chronically ill will be at risk during these times. Next slide, please. Our external physical environment also exacerbates heat. This summer, the city participated in an urban heat study. On the left is a picture of Lowman heading east toward Telshore. The infrared photo on the right describes the ambient temperature of 140 degrees experienced from the heat radiating from the asphalt, pavement, and the vehicles. Next slide, please. With higher temperatures, evaporation increases and moisture is transported elsewhere. Climatologists studying the Southwest project that for every 1 degree Celsius, which is equal to about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit, there will be a 10% decrease in water flows. By the end of the century, temperatures may increase by 5 degrees Celsius or 9 degrees Fahrenheit. This means we could lose 50% of the water flow by the end of the century. This is a huge impact on the agricultural community that uses up to 90% of the surface water. The city relies on groundwater supplies, but infiltration and recharge are important for our supplies. Next slide, please. With heat, we can also expect flash floods. With our traditional stormwater management on the left, water runs down the road into storm drains to retention ponds. Only 15% of the stormwater infiltrates into the ground. If we were to use green infrastructure, stormwater could be used for beneficial purposes throughout the city, directing water to permeable surfaces to support shade trees and increase infiltration from 15% to 50%. Next slide, please. Heat and drought will exacerbate dust storms in our region, carrying particulates, including allergens and fungi. Smoke from fires in neighboring states or closer to home have already become common occurrences. And the impact is felt strongly with those by respiratory problems. But it also is an impediment for travel, growing food, generating solar energy, protecting urban and wild spaces. Next slide, please. So how is Las Cruces citywide contributing to climate change? I'll discuss each of the sectors in more details in the upcoming slides, but as a general picture, 53% of the greenhouse gases or GHG emissions come from transportation. Over 80% of the emissions come from gasoline and diesel on city streets as opposed to highway travel. And the commercial and residential buildings make up 38% of greenhouse gas emissions from the use of electricity and natural gas. The last notable sector is solid waste at 7%. Can you move to the next slide, please? For the next several slides, I'm going to describe our greenhouse gas emission reduction strategic targets. And secondly, I'll explain the overall impact of these strategies at 2030 and 2050. When the steering committee determined the targets, we were going to use, hey fella, no, sorry, David, well, could you, thanks. When the steering committee determined the targets we were going to set, we asked ourselves realistically, how much could we change regardless of the impact on greenhouse gas emissions? Sometimes the targets will show big greenhouse gas reductions and other times they won't. But collectively, they're all important because they address other community values I'll discuss later. For example, the group felt that in the next 10 years, by 2030, we could increase the use of public transportation by 15%. Public transit is an important service. It's the only means for some to get around town. However, in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, ridership is still relatively low, averaging about approximately 2,040 daily rides, and the rides are short, of under 9 miles. By 2030, 15% increase in ridership represents about an increase of 250 more daily rides each day, or 95,000 rides annually. And since vehicle miles traveled are still measured using gas and diesel, we don't see a big impact in public transit. Now you can hit the little return if you want, David. You can see that the target increase of 12% in active transportation has a much bigger impact than public transit, and that's because we have removed fossil fuels from the equation. However, this increase is dependent on the city's commitment to developing an active transportation plan and promote complete compact communities that preclude the need to travel long distances. Many members of the group had a hard, next little return, please. Many of the group had a hard time imagining that 20% of the population could be driving electric vehicles in 10 years, but market trends are headed in that direction. Ford, Chevy, and GM are all introducing electric pickups and similar to F-150s in the next 2 years. And they can accommodate large distance batteries, and they have the torque for heavy towing. And factoring in gas and service costs will make these vehicles have a great return on investments. In the next 10 years, we'll also reduce emissions by less than 12%, as evidenced by the long gray bar on the left side of the graph. Can you hit return one more time, please? By 2050, the use of electric vehicles and the predicted clean electricity promised by the state's Energy Transition Act, a commitment to walkable and bikeable city, and a continued commitment to public transit, emissions will drop by 45% from the 2018 baseline. And this could be higher. Public transit has great potential as we shift to electric buses and increased roads. Next slide, please. The majority of Las Cruces' building stock citywide is neither energy efficient or reliant on clean technologies. Our target to decarbonize energy is waiting for new technologies. Yet our ambitious target for commercial and residential energy efficiency will only reduce energy use by 10 to 30%, still leaving a large portion of the commercial and residential sector untouched. The city has large-scale energy efficiency programs that can serve as an example to others. Collectively, this will result in only 1.7% reduction in the building carbon footprint. Can you hit return, David, several times until you expose 2050? Sorry. We have set more impressive targets by 2050 with greater returns. The success of these targets will be dependent on new technologies, stricter designs and codes, both locally and federally. Next slide, please. We've also set targets to increase adoption of renewable energy, especially in the low, moderate income households and the institutions that serve them. Not only will this reduce their carbon footprint, but more importantly, their utility cost burdens. Implementing this strategy is dependent on either community solar or innovative funding mechanisms. Waste minimizations makes up only 7% of the Las Cruces carbon emissions. However, minimizing waste by 25% by 2030 and 70% by 2050 will require huge shifts in the way that manufacturers reduce and repurpose waste and consumers abandon a disposable mindset. Next slide, please. The first column shows our 2018 baseline carbon emissions. The second column shows our expected increase with population growth and business as usual practices. The next four columns show the expected greenhouse gas reductions of buildings, renewable energy, transportation, and waste. With all the targets we set for 2030 and the anticipated impacts, we can expect to lower our carbon footprint by 19.1% in the next 10 years. Next slide, please. By 2050, the baseline increase and the growth from business as usual activities, column 1 and 2, and our ambitious results from columns 3 and 6 will result in a 72.8% reduction. The Paris Climate Agreement sets a reduction goal of 80%, and many cities and other jurisdictions are setting more ambitious goals of net zero. This is what our team could agree on, but I hope we're all encouraged to move more. Next slide, please. These are all the major strategies I just presented now in a side-by-side comparison. As you can see, decarbonizing energy in buildings, increasing solar adoption, active transportation development, and the use of EVs will move the needle the most. The hope is if leadership at all levels and sectors reduce our collective carbon footprint, the shocks and stressors of climate change, extreme heat, drought, dust, fire, and floods will lessen. But we also know that the frontline communities are the hardest hit. So the Climate Action Plan, considers other important values. Next slide, please. The strategies presented today and further action that support these strategies will also put these values front and center. The circular economy of reducing and repurposing waste, the clean energy transition, will create new jobs, green jobs, and spur innovation, lessen utility costs, and safeguard health. Resiliency is about the ability to rebound from the shocks and stressors we have already set in motion. And for me, with a special intention for frontline communities, I'll continue my work in resiliency. Next slide, please. There are many policies in Elevate Las Cruces that address the strategies described today. What the Climate Action Plan does is provide a framework, data, targets, metrics, and a timeline to push these policies forward. Next slide, please. Next. Today, I'm asking the council to adopt the Climate Action Plan, which will mean reducing greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 by 19%, by 73% in 2050, and a parallel or more ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets in the municipality by the same dates, and to incorporate climate science and projections into relevant city planning and policy decisions, and receive updates every 2 years. Next slide, please. So today, the step is that we're taking is the adoption of the Climate Action Plan, hopefully, and the city staff will continue to participate in operational boards to develop specific actions for each sector. And the city council will have the opportunity to review these plans in policy review committees and to advance the sectors. And we will anticipate that city staff will incorporate energy transition targets and others to benefit the utility work, renewable energy, transportation, building, and waste sectors. Next slide, please. And so I stand for questions and we'll wait for the council's vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Let me just tell you, this was an excellent plan. I can still remember when we first created this position And we were thinking, okay, so what exactly we're going to do? What is a sustainability officer going to do? But you've really taken this and developed a fantastic department. And I'm really proud of how you've been able to do this. And this was really good, very good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we got Councilor Sorg, Vasquez, Bencomo, and Gondara. Councilor Sorg.
Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Lisa. That was quite a bunch of pieces of information. It was awesome. I would like to take the opportunity here to add some more to it. As most of you know, I've studied climate change now for a couple, 3 decades, and culminating in a course at NMSU in just climate change. And some of the things I learned, and I've learned since and before, are these. There's a Dr. James Hansen, who was a scientist at NASA at the Goddard Space Center. In the 1970s, he was in charge or part of a team that did the Venus probe, or they sent a probe to Venus, and he learned that there's a huge amount of carbon dioxide on Venus, and Venus is exceptionally hot. So in the years after they learned this, he put 2 and 2 together and decided, well, carbon dioxide must have something to do with heating. And so it acts as a blanket over the earth here, and temperatures indeed had been, since they've been measuring them, had been going up. And in 1988, he testified to Congress warning the country that we were going to be in trouble with climate change. He actually predicted exactly the climate we're having today in 1988. He's been working on this for 32 years, trying to warn the government to do something about it. So today he's a professor at Columbia University in working on climate change there. While we have our largest fires in California and Oregon in history, 31 people have died this year in the fires. The firefighters there say they have what they call a career fire, where each fireman has one big fire that he has during his career. Well, it turns out it's what they call a fire of a lifetime. Well, it turns out now every year they're having career fires, and they're saying that eventually all of California will burn. It's a rate at 40 million acres this year alone. So in fact, they said they can name 10 fires in California that could qualify as career fires just this year. People say there that they've never dreamed that this would ever have happened. Also, we have on Earth the hottest temperature ever recorded. It was in Death Valley at 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Never have been a temperature that high. And we have in the east part of the country twice the number of damaging storms with flooding and hurricane winds than average. And of course, not too long ago, there was the mega drought, and we're still having drought to this day. Another scientist working on this is a Dr. Michael Mann. He's a professor at Penn State University. He is the one that did the paper in 1998 that showed the famous hockey stick graph, showing the temperatures going up like the shape of a hockey stick. He actually he's quoted as saying, "Man-caused climate change is as real as gravity." So this new normal, will this be a new normal or will it be worse? The next 30 years, he's claiming that global warming will get worse and worse. And ultimately, the greatest danger is losing our ice sheets. That loss of ice sheets will raise the sea level minimum of 2 meters. And many coastal cities will be flooded, and many ocean islands will be covered in water. So therefore, I'm suggesting we get bold here. A bold policy. When I think of natural gas, we will need to have a national plan that prices the natural gas to its full cost to the environment and to us, and making it competitive with electricity for our heating, water heating and cooking. I propose that the new utility bonds that we do in the future do not use natural gas as a source for the payback with increased sales, that we leave natural gas out so that as we get electricity and competitive with natural gas, we will phase out our natural gas. This will take some time. Another one, as you know from Lisa's presentation, transportation is our highest producer of greenhouse gases. And so I think we need to be aggressive here. We have a good start with the 5 new electric buses coming next year. I think we ought to commit to 5 more new electric buses in the following year, 2022, and 100% electric buses by 2023. You know, it's kind of nice driving behind a bus when it doesn't spew out exhaust that from a diesel engine. Another thing I'd like to propose is that we, this fiscal year be the last year that the city buys a fossil fuel vehicle when there are electric vehicles available to buy in its place. And I would like to see us let the gasoline and diesel vehicles we are using now be the last ones we have in this city. Then finally, the active transportation plan must be accelerated. We must have do the things in the active transportation plan faster. And finally, we need to get going on our building codes to have our buildings more energy efficient and suited for reducing of our greenhouse gases. Yeah, I'd like to predict, like in the 2040s, our greenhouse gas production, we won't get to zero, as Lisa pointed out, but it'll be so low that we will be able to sequester all of the CO2 that we produce and actually take more out of the atmosphere than we produce. A negative CO2 and methane production, as I'm looking forward in the 2030s, 40s. I hope to live that long. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Sorg. Some interesting propositions there. A lot of them I can agree with you on. I'd be interested to see if they make fire trucks electric, and I have no problem with that. I know that, especially when it comes to police cars, you know, how long that they can go and how fast they can go on electric.
Yeah, well, New York City has ordered a new fleet of all electric vehicles for its police force, their patrol cars.
Yeah, but
So,
New York, yeah,
here in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think our city's bigger than area-wise in New York City, but you know, you never know. I mean, I definitely, and then we're going to get, I don't know how much they cost and where we're going to get the money from. But I think it's something there that I'd be interested in learning more about. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lisa and Councilor Sorg, for your questions. I'll say first that I concur with Councilor Sorg about our natural gas bonding, and really the future of our natural gas utility is something we need to look at. I know we just completed an expansion in Talavera for an additional couple thousand homes, I believe, which represents that, you know, the utility right now is expanding its service of natural gas rather than, you know, thinking about the future of electric homes, smart homes, for example, that really will be powered by renewable energies. And I think that's the future of where the industry is going. That's where the energy markets are pointing to. And so I think there's some important work to do at the utilities department with respect to natural gas and figuring out kind of the short-term and long-term curve of where we want to go with that. Because at some point, the market will dictate that it's no longer going to be even profitable probably for the city, depending on the rates of natural gas in the future. So I agree on that, and I think the first place to start is bonding out to the revenue of the natural gas utility. I do have a question, Lisa, for you. A couple questions. One is, so in respect to what the city can do and what our role is in curbing climate change, we obviously have lots of other greenhouse gas emitters out in our region that contribute to where we want to be in the future. And so from what you know, or from your research, or maybe even for Councilor Sorg, how of the greenhouse gas emissions, I guess in total, how much of that comes from municipalities and how much comes from like fossil fuel industries, oil and gas industry?
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, the greenhouse gas inventory that we did was considered a basic plus. So it just showed our use and our emissions within the city, and it didn't include and included our electricity use from El Paso Electric. I can answer your question in part. One is that if you look at our greenhouse gases as a municipality to the whole city-wide greenhouse gases, we only emit 3% of those greenhouse gases. And if you look at what our consumption rate is in electricity compared to the city as a whole, we consume 10% of the electricity in the city. But I can't speak to the overall industry and how that relates to the city.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. And I think it's something like 40 tons of emissions that comes out of the industry every year, or at least in the last couple of years. And I don't know what our inventory is here locally, but that's just for New Mexico. And the reason I ask about that is, I know perhaps some of our investments that are tied into the financial markets help to prop up and propagate fossil fuel industries. And so I want us to be aware also that while we can do things at the city to curb our own greenhouse gas emissions, the mega polluters are trending in the opposite direction. With the latest coronavirus relief set of packages that the federal government approved, $100 billion worth of investment in the form of buying bonds and buying credit, and the Fed propping up the oil and gas industry. 100 billion of that went to that industry. Right? We got, I think, just a couple million here at the city for our own relief funds. And so I think it's just important for us to also look at where our money is tied up as a city in terms of our money markets and some of our investments. And I know some of that is invested by the State Investment Council. But to me, it would seem counterproductive for us to reduce our carbon footprint here while at the same time financing the companies that are, contributing the most to fossil fuel extraction and greenhouse gas emissions. So I think we have to look at both of those. And I don't know how we do that internally. I know some of those markets are complicated to look at, but I know we have some very smart consultants and people who know where the city's money is tied up. And so that's something I'd like to see in the future too, what percentage of the city's money is invested into the fossil fuel industries, to see if we can diversify away from that. And I know we can, even in your own 401k plan, if you have one, or a retirement plan, you can tell your financial advisor, I don't want any of my money to go to the, petroleum industry or oil and gas industry. And they'll probably tell you, hey, you're not going to get as good returns, or whatever. But we've seen that the bus cycles of oil and gas too oftentimes isn't beneficial to us anyway. So that's just something to consider, Lisa, for like Climate Action 2.0 on the financial piece of where our money's going. The other question is around measuring our carbon emissions. How do we do that? How do we measure? How do we know when we're meeting our goals? And you mentioned a whole bunch of different potentials for reducing our footprint. But so how is that measured?
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, I'll try to do this in a nutshell for you because it is more spreadsheets than you've ever imagined. But what we do is look at different fuel sources, and we know the factors that each fuel source emits in terms of greenhouse gases. And then we find out how many cars there are, what the mileage is, and what types of vehicles we have. We through the Metropolitan Planning Office, or we look at census data. So there's a lot of factors that we follow a protocol too called the International Protocol that is very comprehensive in terms of spelling out exactly the way that you measure things and what factors and assumptions that you make. And so we hired a company to create all of these spreadsheets, and they created a baseline for us. And so we will use the same methodology in a couple years to capture that data again and be able to see the trends. But it is an international protocol that will stand up in all comparisons. I don't know if I addressed
Okay.
you correctly.
No, I figured there was a lot of spreadsheets involved in
I'm
that
happy
kind of
to
thing.
show them to you though.
And then in terms of like the residential solar that you mentioned as part of this equation, is that done by permits? Like, do we just look at all the permits that the city has issued for residential solar and then?
Residential solar, Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, residential solar is a little bit more complicated in that there's a shift now in what portion of solar electricity El Paso Electric can claim, because anything that is used at the site belongs to the owner of the solar, and anything that's sent to the grid belongs to El Paso Electric because they're going to move it around. So what is needed is to encourage low and moderate income communities to be able to do it is a better financing mechanism. And I'm looking at either community solar, where we have a low moderate income rate specifically, or else other funding mechanisms like using opportunity zones and the tax credits from solar to reduce the payback for solar for low income to like 7 years, and then they'll be electricity bill free. So those are some of the financial mechanisms I'm looking for, because I know that it's not something that one could readily do with a challenge with an income of that level.
Thank you for mentioning that, Lisa. I think that's you captured that in the equity piece of your presentation, and I'm glad you're doing that research. And I know some state legislation I think maybe still needs to move for us to do something more significant in terms of I guess for the city to be able to build a community solar farm, right, and be able to actually lower the cost of solar for, like you said, low income or moderate income residents. That would be a solution, a potential solution, if we could do it legally. But right now we can't do that, right? Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, not until the community solar bill is passed, we can't do that. But you could do something like a power purchase agreement on community solar if you had an investor that was willing to support low income communities. And there are environmental and green bonds that can work towards that.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. And I think that's an important thing for us to also just think about when our legislative session comes up. You know, I could see this being folded under the climate action plan. You know, if we're invested into this, Larry and some of our other folks who go up to Santa Fe should really be pushing for this, as well as the council should be passing resolutions in support of this. If it helps us meet our climate action plan goals, if this does pass. So I think that's just one thing to be conscious of. I also want to comment that I appreciate you connecting the goals of the climate action plan to the Elevate Las Cruces strategic goals. Thank you for doing that. I think thinking about that the next set of strategic planning that the city does, you know, we should also be thinking about how our new strategic plan also meets the goals of the climate action plan. So thank you for that. And then the other question is around the municipal, you know, our own facilities and outfitting them with solar. The mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, I think, just mentioned we're talking about the plaza shade structure and the opportunity to have solar there. And I think when we got the price tag for that from the estimate from the engineers last time was, you know, it seemed a little steep for a shade structure, right? Considering what we'd be getting, and then thinking about adding solar panels, we didn't even get a cost estimate for that, because I think from a lot of folks it seemed cost prohibitive, or just, you know, what is the cost of this? And I know Councilor Bencomo was pushing for it too, but this conversation makes me rethink about what the value is on these investments. And so in terms of building out new infrastructure, things like these, you know, shade structures that would be perfect as solar collectors, you know, I'm wondering how, in addition to some of the investments Councilor Sorg made, we create policy that dictates that, you know, that we have to look at solar on new facilities, and factor that into the overall project analysis, even if it's a little bit more expensive.
Mayor and Councilor Vasquez.
Be conscious of and maybe think a little.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Mayor and Councilor Vasquez, we have already done that with some of the power purchase agreements that we have, where in the case of Burn Lake and the airport, we ourselves have paid for the structure that will hold the solar panels, and this yet we're using the power purchase agreement for the solar panels themselves, so we're not incurring the cost for the solar panels, but just the structure. So your proposal is still possible if we use that route.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. And then lastly, I just want to make another comment that I think we shouldn't be paying for all of this ourselves. I think the state needs to be paying for this. The federal government needs to incentivize the creation and implementation of this infrastructure. Programs like, you know, the CARES Act and others. I mean, I could envision a new administration that is more in line, that maybe just believes in climate change as a whole, actually creates jobs, right? You can create jobs out of doing all of this work, and you could really revolutionize this industry if you invested in it from the very top, coming all the way in the form of grants and programs to cities like ours. And so I know we won't be able to pay for everything that we want right off the bat, but I do envision down the state and then to our community to help pay for all this stuff, so that it's not cost prohibitive for municipalities, and in fact good for our economy and good for local jobs. And so I look forward to that, but in the meantime, being prepared for that and doing what we can as a city with our budget is really important. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Bencomo. Oh, can't hear you, Councilor.
Can you guys hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble with, I click on mute and then it takes like several seconds to actually unmute. Okay, great.
Leave it unmuted.
No, because then you hear my dog barking.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Thank you, though. Thank you so much, Lisa, for the presentation. I think this plan is incredibly well thought out. I think the whole process leading up to today has been holistic and clearly very fruitful. And I want to thank you just for your expertise. And I'm very thankful that we have someone like you in the city of Las Cruces, even though Zoom might be your
I want to be perfect.
I think you are incredibly, I'm so thankful that, again, you work here and for the city and that you're leading this effort. I don't even have feedback. I also just have several comments to make regarding some of the things that I consider to be top priorities out of this plan. But I did want to address Councilor Sorg's proposals. I think I agree that it's time for bold policies. I also want to make sure that as we consider some of these bold policies, that they have a layer, that we're looking at these policies with the racial and economic equity lens. Often, yes, low-income communities of color are the ones that are at the front lines of climate change. They are experiencing these effects the worst. They're also the ones who, being climate friendly and transitioning to these policies, they're cost prohibitive, right? Like they are very expensive. Unfortunately, we're still in that place. And so low-income communities are often the ones left sort of behind trying to figure it out. And I think that's when government should step in. I mean, government should step in regarding climate change as a whole in general, but particularly when it comes to protecting and ensuring our most marginalized communities are at the center and our priority. I was reading, yesterday as I was reading this, I was doing some research and found really great information regarding just things that I think we should keep in mind. Habitat for Humanity, for example, did a study on some of these things a while ago. I'd be interested to see some new data, but they found that low-income families in the United States spend anywhere from 17% to 50% of their income on household energy. So the majority of people's income are going to paying their bills and figuring out, this month I'm going to pay my bill. I probably won't pay my medical debt. I probably won't pay right? Like they're continuously having to make sacrifices. And so whatever we can do to make energy efficiency more and more affordable, I think we should keep that to me, that is number one priority. Of course, there's a fear that as more and more people get off the gas grid, someone still has to pay for that infrastructure, right? And so then the smaller number of customers, which probably are low-income households, end up having to pay more for their utility bill. So yes, I agree that we need to look at our LCU and really think about a plan to phase off natural gas, and be really cognizant, though, that low-income communities will be disproportionately impacted by that shift. And so how do we start making investing in programs now that really put those households at the center? I mean, even when I consider just our vote earlier today with Tierra del Sol, how are we, figuring out ways to get grants so that it's not really a should we or should we not make this new affordable housing development solar, but it should be a given. We absolutely should make this new affordable housing development completely solar. And so what's our responsibility to ensure Tierra del Sol has access to those resources? I think that's really critical. I obviously I'm going to, talk about this again because we've talked about it before, but given that transportation are the largest block of producer of greenhouse gases, I think, in the plan, it says reduce the rates for low-income families for transportation. I think public transportation should be free for everybody, and we will continue to discuss that at our TSI and our TSI PRC because I really believe that public transit isn't a luxury; it's a necessity, and it should be accessible to everybody for free. I think that's one of the biggest. The larger the ridership, the better our public transit system will be, right? It won't take me 30 minutes to get from my house that's close to downtown to City Hall. And that's not a critique, right? That's just the reality of our program. But if it would take me a lot less time, I would ride it more often. Whereas I can get in my car and it takes me like 2 minutes to get there, right? So I think there's definitely things we should consider about how we get people out of their cars and into public transit, especially if we'll be investing in electric buses, which I think is a great idea. I think so that's one of the main priorities. What I took out of this report, a couple other things that I think should be top priority. This low income energy efficient retrofit. I'm curious what kind of programs we already have. I'm curious what kind of programs, Lisa, you think we should have. Well, I'll leave it at that, right? Like what, in terms of this energy efficiency retrofitting, what do we have in terms of programs? What do you think we should have? And how quickly can we do some of these things?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, are you asking me to answer that right now? Is that what you're?
I can pause. I've been talking a lot. So
No, that's fine. I just didn't know if that was rhetorical. There are several programs that are out there. One in particular that's very large. Besides El Paso Electric has a retrofit program for low and moderate income folks, and they pay for the whole thing, but you don't qualify for everything. If you don't have air conditioning, then that eliminates many of the programs that they have. If you don't have an electric water heater, that eliminates you from other programs. So it isn't comprehensive for a lot of the people in the areas. I mean, they may get free light bulbs, which lower their bill, but they're not going to get the insulation or factors that they need for extreme heat. I feel that there is an opportunity to work with the university to really try to ramp the programs up that they had in Doñana Community College for renewable energy and energy efficiency that haven't had any real strong participation, and to try to connect that with a program for the low and moderate income communities that uses that same population and does energy efficiency at a much faster rate. So it's a green jobs program, cooperative, along with it. That's the goal that I'm working towards, so we can accelerate it. So and then the city also has programs, but the rate with which we're addressing them, the houses that are in need, is much slower than, it needs to be scaled up. So it isn't that the programs don't exist, they're just not hitting as many homes as need to be addressed.
Thanks, Lisa. I would love to work on a plan, perhaps through a work session or whatever other means, to really scale up some of these programs. I think this is, like, to me, one of the biggest priorities, right? Especially as, we confront worse and worse climate changes, and these communities are the ones that are impacted the most. So I would love for us to do something like that, Lisa, to really sit down and figure out how we can scale up some of these programs. Similarly, and I know that earlier this year we had Mr. Patrick Peck join us for a work session on some of these issues related to trash and waste and recycling. And one of the things that we talked even then was this idea of a circular economy. So as I think about the biggest priorities to me that I see in this plan, that is another one of those. I think we really have to get serious about how we approach and bring in people who are interested in these types of jobs, these types of economies, and get serious about actually have a plan, a timeline set forth that says we will have this type of business here locally by 2022. I think that's equally important that we set some of those bolder strategies when it comes in relation to a circular economy. And the last thing I'll say is, actually, no, I do have a question, Lisa, another one. In terms of the commercial, the 21% of commercial buildings, within that, do you have it broken down in terms of like, what are some of the biggest, like school buildings, does that fit under here? Like, what are some of the largest, so like, is this broken down into categories as well? And what are some of the largest sort of players?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, I don't have that data. I could extrapolate it from looking at their natural gas use, because the city would be able to break that down, but El Paso Electric is not very forthcoming with its data, and so it makes it difficult to drill down into those sorts of questions. So I don't know, but I can clearly imagine that the schools are a big part of that.
Right. So I imagine as well. And so how do we work with the public schools, right, to really figure out some strategies together? Definitely calling on El Paso Electric to be more transparent with some of their data. It's critical as we move forward in policy making, that they definitely need to provide some of that for us. So if folks are listening, that's something that I would love to see from them. And Lisa, perhaps in the future, this is data that we can start collecting and you can start presenting to us. I would love to know, broken down within these particular percentages, what are some of the biggest producers? That's my last question. The last thing I'll say is, that things like policies like the Green New Deal are not radical, they're necessary. Given what we've seen across the country and especially in California this summer, it's more apparent to me that we need to support policies like that. I think Las Cruces, from what I've seen from this council and prior councils, have a pretty serious commitment to climate change. I think we know what's coming as a desert community, and we want to try to prevent that as much as possible. So I agree with Councilor Vasquez in terms of the advocacy we need to be pushing for at the state level. But I would also say that that we need to push for, that we also need to have resolutions, which, I know might not do the trick always, but I think it's important that we are vocal about how we feel about these things. So in the new Congress, I would love us to have a resolution about the Green New Deal, and also push for the federal government to start taking bolder actions when it comes to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lisa, for your presentation. Always very impressive. And I think I've said it, I know that we need a larger department or more employees than you looking at this specifically. And at different times we've asked or requested maybe to have a department on its own with several people. So I will say that out loud, that I think in order for us to continue to move the needle, we need other people, including you, as part of a overall department. And so I understand in the new fiscal year, you've moved to under the city manager position. And I've talked specifically about that, with him on that, because I think it's important that, there's some oversight of this plan moving forward. And so, I know that in the past, through the Quality of Life Policy Review Committee, we have spoken specifically about public transportation and how we start to encourage that with our citizenry to include our young people. And so I know that we've had a couple of conversations. Lisa, I'm not sure that you're aware of this because I don't think you sit on the PRC, that particular PRC, but we've had conversations about how do we work together with our schools, right, and educating our youth about climate change, the importance of using public transportation. And so I've actually have had conversations with our youth specific to this, and they're not real familiar with it. And so what do we do? So I know that we've brought Robert Nunez in and Jamie Rickman to have some of these more detailed conversations. And so I think we need to continue to have those conversations, because honestly, I think as much as we would like this, I think it's difficult when, we were still at one time with coins, and then we moved from coins, to purchasing tickets and those kinds of things. And I know that I've talked to parents who've said, I want my kid to use the bus, but he loses his pass. And so how do we move into, having an app where we can purchase, daily tickets or monthly tickets and be able to use that, and then encourage our youth, because I think that's where it begins, right? Encouraging our youth. There are some teachers that in all grade levels that actually use the bus system because a lot of the kids are reliant on it, and so, but there's others that aren't. So I'd love to see us move into developing graphics specific to what you've just displayed to us, because I think it's important that we are using Facebook and other platforms really to educate the community. Instagram, Snapchat, and really, Facebook. Kids don't use Facebook. Kids use Snapchat and Twitter and TikTok and all those other things that I'm not too familiar with. And so I think if we educate them young, then they start to have more of an appreciation, right? They're going to be our change setters for sure. And so I do want to let Councilor Bencomo know that those conversations have been had and they need to continue. I no longer sit on that quality review committee, but certainly, I think that we needed to really dictate some strategies related to that. Also, in terms of our utilities department, I've made mention this before, and I was happy to see Delilah at a lot of these meetings, that we can start with our change of our name, right? The utilities department to energy department, where then we can, or whatever interesting name we want to, that has energy in there, which would really emphasize that, we are really making a choice to start moving out of, natural gas into other important, like solar and I guess, new electricity. And again, like Councilor Bencomo, when we talked about Tierra del Sol, I often thought, I was thinking, gosh, do we even recommend this as any new, and that's a policy we could probably get behind, is any new development needs to be able to have, a home wired or whatever for new energy, solar, that kind of thing. And so any kind of development that the city's a part of should really take that under consideration. Let's see, I wrote a few more notes. Let me see. I know that, Mayor, we had talked about having a specific meeting with the school board. There had been some discussions in the past about solar and their interest, and really connecting them to, some purchasing that, like Johnson, and that purchasing power agreement that we have, and maybe it's an opportunity to have a joint meeting to speak specifically about this, I think would be important. And then lastly, in terms of Lisa, I would recommend that we make these types of presentations to our South Central Solid Waste Authority Board. Councilor Vasquez and I sit on that board. I think it would be important to, I know that Patrick, our director, often feels, even though he has a great relationship with our former director, Dr. Garcia, and I'm sure he has a good relationship with Delilah, that I think often maybe he feels separate and apart, and being able to have those conversations, because he's very interested in this, as Councilor Bencomo spoke to the circular economy, he's really interested in building, a recycling plant, really looking at those kinds of opportunities, and why not have I don't know who's the chair of the sustainability PRC, but I would recommend that you encourage those conversations. Councilor Sorg is raising his hand. So pulling in the schools, pulling in DACC, Patrick Peck, and he also participated in this group that developed this plan, Lisa. And so I just get the feeling like he feels, again, separate and apart, and more opportunity to get him. And he has his marching orders. The board has wanted us to, him to move into the direction of developing, this recycling arm, because of the issues that we're having currently, right, with our recycling partner. And so I'd really like to encourage that to happen. And I know we're putting a lot on your plate. I can't, but you sure do it with style and grace, and I appreciate that. Again, I think if we're going to move this, we need to utilize our PRCs and have, more employees than one that actually addresses this specifically. And so with that, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I will tell you that I know I met with Lisa and the schools, and we shared with them our strategies, how we use third-party agreements to build or be able to put this on their buildings. And I think Lisa has really pretty much just said, hey, whatever you need help, just let us know. And so, we're in that area where we don't want to try to tell them what to do. We will show them how we do ours, and leave it up to them. But I'm pretty sure, I'm almost certain that I was there when Lisa said, hey, what are we going to do to help? Just let us know.
Sure. And I'm not saying twist their arm or anything, but maybe a very specific presentation to them, right, would be helpful, or having a specific meeting so that they understand where we're at and how they contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions would probably benefit all of us in my mind. So thank you, Mayor.
You can also send them a recording of this meeting. So.
We could.
I'm just kidding. Councilor Flores.
The first part.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I really, really want to thank my colleagues so far. I know that Councilor Abeyta-Stubbe has been very active in the field of climate change, who hasn't spoken yet. But I want to thank, especially, I just really want to extend my gratitude to Lisa, Ms. LaRock, because she has worked by herself for quite some time and has had obstacles. And I think some of us are aware of them. And hopefully those obstacles are no longer there. And being a one-person band, as you are, a one-person department, I too have spoken with our city manager about how wonderful it is that you are now part of the city manager's office, as opposed to being a part of a department that really didn't work, in my humble opinion. But I want to thank you, Lisa, also for your hard work, your vision. The Nevada corridor, I think, is exemplary, and a good example of how a city can take the smaller steps and take them at a time. So I too believe that you should have your own department. I believe that you should continue to head it up and be your director, be the director, and have your handpicked employees, people who really have a good background, a good resume. As a city councilor, as a council, we can't in any way interfere with the personnel issues or the hiring and firing of personnel. But as policymakers, the city, in fact, the departments are driven by our policy. And I think that every councilor has spoken before me, and the mayor, and I know that Councilor Abeyta-Stube will also contribute to this, is that we're setting policy, and our policy and this resolution, which in all likelihood will pass unanimously, is an indication of where our city has to go. So every department has to be looking at conservation measures, at climate change issues. And I became of the gravity of climate change when I saw that film that Al Gore put together. What was it? Can't remember what it was.
Something about the truth, or I forget
Something
what
about the inconvenient truth, right? The inconvenient truth.
Yes.
And I'm really grateful to the work that Councilor Sorg has done, and wonderful people like Patrick Nolan and Kevin Bixby, who really dedicate their lives to this, and others in the community. I don't mean to exclude them, but it's just that those two names for some reason come to mind readily. But I do want to emphasize that our meetings, when we have these meetings, it's the only time we can discuss policy. It's the only time we can openly discuss things that really matter to us, what really, they're at the core of what we care about. And I also appreciate so much, Lisa, that in all the presentations and wherever, you always bring up equity. And we really have to bring up that, not a box for a short kid to be looking into the arena or the ball game, but a box that's tall enough for that person to be able to look over and participate or look at that ball game. So along those lines, I think that I really, and I too, as your presentation, as Councilor Bencomo mentioned, Tierra del Sol is a good example. Not that I'm picking on them or anything, but I really, if there's any way that we can make it a policy so that any new structure that goes out has to have solar panels, because solar panels for individuals, once it becomes an economy or an economy-based business, it's going to probably flourish and become cheaper, hopefully, or less expensive, I should say. So I wanted to, those I think are the things I want to mention. And also, I also want to bring up the fact that I know Councilor Abeyta-Stube, who's our vice chair, and Mayor Pro Tem Gandara and I serve on the board for the joint powers, pursuant to the joint powers agreement between the Las Cruces Public Schools and the City of Las Cruces. We sit on the board for community schools, and I think that we work on that board. We're really striving to bring our community schools, to make most of, if not all our schools, community schools, and deal with these fundamental issues. So, and climate change is a fundamental issue. We have to survive, and things aren't getting better. So that's also an arena or a place where we can definitely work with implementing climate change modems. So again, thank you so much, Lisa, for everything you do, Ms. LaRock, and I hope that you do have a department with the appropriate personnel And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, fellow councilors.
Thank you. Councilor Abeyta-Stube.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lisa, for such a wonderful presentation. Being speak today, most of my questions, thoughts, concerns have already been raised by my fellow councilors. Some of the biggest concerns I usually have when it comes about climate and energy, which I'm very active with, as Councilor Forrest said, is that of equity and just making sure that when we put in policies and procedures, we're not doing undue harm to those that are struggling the most oftentimes. So we've answered that. We are looking through those lenses, and I hope that we continue to do so. You know, I'm very concerned a lot about heat. You brought in that fire, flood, dust, heat, and drought. And so those, I think we've experienced a lot of that over the summer. In my background, I come from Los Alamos, which had massive fires, kind of not too far apart, to be honest. And it took over 250 homes, including my own home and my cousins, family members, so many people. And it really can devastate a community, and it takes a long time to get that back. From there, you know, it's one thing that's not talked about a lot, but that of the health issues when we talk about climate change, and that of excess. And when we have those warnings in the summertime with any of our population that has to spend most of their time outside, that's a major concern. But also, if we are looking at being this retirement community, we want to make sure that also recognizing that the population that can suffer probably a little bit more from this, or if you have certain conditions. I do look forward to supporting, hopefully.
Kind of breaking up there, Councilor.
Okay. Okay, hopefully this is better. Short, because my internet is unstable today, but thank you so much. I do appreciate it. And I look forward to supporting this.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sorg, do you have another question?
Comment? Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to comment on my total agreement with the other council members that have been speaking today on this topic. I totally agree with them, especially when it comes to equity and the negative impact on low income and the poor. We're going to have to try to figure out a way to mitigate our future heat problems on the people that live in these houses that aren't going to be able to be kept to a temperature where we can tolerate it. There is a program for water conservation in some cities, and I'm thinking we're going to have it here too, where we use subsidies on water saving devices, and possibly we could use subsidies for energy saving devices for low income people too in the future. Anyway, I know Lisa is working on this. I've heard her talk about it many times, and so we got your back, Lisa. Keep at it, and we'll get some good programs going here. Thank you, Mayor. I think it's been a great discussion today.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, very good. Well, again, Lisa, thank you for everything, and we appreciate it very much. And with that, I'll call on Christine for the vote.
This is on the motion to approve Resolution 21-060. Councilor Abeyta-Stube?
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Couldn't hear you, Councilor. Put your thumb up, yes or no? Yes. Record reflect thumbs up, meaning yes.
Counselor Sorg,
Yes.
Counselor Flores,
Yes.
Counselor Gondara,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Okay, now we're going to go to board appointments. The El Paseo Corridor Committee. Crystal McCaslin, appointed by Councilor Sorg. Joseph Fumiller, appointed by Councilor Vasquez. And let's see here. I need on the Health PRC, Adrian Larson. I need a motion in a second, please.
So moved, Abeda Stuvey.
Second by Flores.
The motion made by Councilor Beta Stuvey, second by Councilor Flores to appoint Adrian Larson to the Health PRC. Christine?
This is on the motion to appoint Adrian Larson to the Health PRC. Counselor Beta Stuvey,
Yes.
Counselor Vasquez,
Yes.
Counselor Bencomo.
Yes.
I heard you this time.
Okay, great.
Counselor Sorg,
Yes.
Counselor Flores,
Yes.
Counselor Gondara.
Yes, I'm going to put my thumb up.
We're going to make that a new thing. And Mayor.
Yes. Okay, now we're going to go to notice of proposed ordinances. There'll be no public discussion. Council may ask staff for clarification on proposed ordinance. Item 10.1, Council Bill number 21-021, ordinance number 2954.
Bring it forward.
Bring it forward, okay. And now we go to member board, excuse me, council board reports and comment. I have a couple things. So I'd like if, I don't know if Jennifer is here on the call, Jennifer, City Attorney Jennifer Vega Brown. So I was asked if we would consider $20,000 for Coats for Kids. This is to help out those children who have no coats for the wintertime, and what it is because of COVID, the organization that usually raises the money can't have their annual fundraiser. And so these are children that I think would meet the qualification of very low, extremely low income, and they have no jackets. So if we could have, I'll get an email and then I'll forward it to staff to Jennifer and staff and EFO. They can take a look at it, see if that's possible. Second question, I don't know if Sonia's here. I wanted to know a little bit about, and I don't know about this, but on Halloween, Sonia, are our parks used a lot for parties? Sonia Delgado.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Sonia Delgado, Director of Parks and Recreation. Our parks are used a lot throughout the entire year, as long as the weather is good. We anticipate to have people out there. We don't have anyone who rents or reserves a park space for a Halloween get-together or party, but I'm sure individuals do go out there.
Okay. I'll get with you after in the forthcoming week or so. I may want to consider closing the parks for that weekend for Halloween, because if our COVID numbers keep going up, it's a little worrisome.
Okay.
Using the, because I think my those actions are 72 hours, and that way we don't have to do a resolution. Unless the council wants to move forward with a resolution, I don't know, but we'll monitor the situation and kind of go from there. Last thing, so he finally emailed me. I know he was a little timid, or was trying to get his staff to, but that's Zach Wiegert. He wants to have a discussion with me. Yeah, so we're gonna have a Zoom this week, and I let some of his cohorts know that I don't plan on really changing my position. And my position isn't that we don't want it. The position, or at least I don't want it. It's not that. The position is the things that I had discussed with him I really don't see myself changing. In fact, it was reinforced by that report by Daniel Hernandez and the lady's name, I forgot her name. But that report that we had written, I think I gave a little bit of a synopsis last time. So just thought I'd let you know.
Yes.
Okay.
Hernandez report?
I'm sorry, Councilor?
Was it the Hernandez report?
Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so there, and because of that report, if you all recall, I thought it would be nice to have this used as an exercise in the future to see what are some of the things that could go wrong with a public-private TID. And so I'm glad we did this. So I'll just let you know. Okay. And if it's something that he's somewhat agreeable, then you'll see, I'll probably schedule a work session and we'll have another one. We'll see how it goes. Okay, that's all I've got. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Mayor. Just want to report back, our Suicide Prevention Task Force had its first ever virtual meeting and it being our 4th annual celebration, recovery celebration and suicide awareness event. I haven't seen the numbers over the weekend, but it looks like we had over 500 people. Excuse me, actually, not 500, 1,000 people go and look at one time or another the celebration. So I would recommend that you go to our website. It's a brand new website. Let me know how it looks. It's lcsuicideprevention.com. That is lcsuicideprevention.com. You will see leadership, you'll see resources, and the actual virtual meeting that happened Friday from 5 to 8. So special thanks to Mayor for reading the proclamation and giving an introduction. And we had some wonderful speakers, homegrown, basically, Sergeant Major Fisk to speak on veteran issues, and Suan Kenny Noziska, who is a local child therapist, play therapist that works specifically on trauma. John Birch is the other that spoke to his work with the youth, and he is a life coach in our community. And then we had various testimonials from people who have either recovered and or currently recovering from alcohol and drug issues, and or those folks that have attempted suicide. We also had an individual father who has his son completed suicide, who did a testimonial there at the gravesite. Mayor, you're familiar with him. He was the same individual that worked with us last year. And it was very heartbreaking. But I hope that people felt that they could get information, but also memorialize, if you will. We had a memory board with folks that have passed on because of abuse, addiction or suicide, and we hope everybody felt that there's hope and a way out in some ways. So I would. You getting into that website and sharing it with folks. Lots of very important numbers, for like the crisis hotline, those kinds of things. And with that, Mayor, I've seen over Facebook some as we know, attempts to get into City Hall. There was some damage and whatnot. Someone broke glass, and I don't know if there was a lot of things stolen from the area where T-Mobile off of Lowman, that shopping center, T-Mobile and Rack Room specifically. And so I know that Chief had worked on that and responded to the call at 3 a.m, but no one from the key holders would come and approach them. And so, of course, the public blames police when the workers get there and finds out someone attempted to rob the place. And so, Mayor, I'm thinking that it would be important that we work with community development and law enforcement to send letters maybe to the alarm system folks that work there, just encouraging people to respond to law enforcement accordingly so that the investigation can ensue and law enforcement can get on their way. I know they went twice to that area when it was unnecessary, and then they get flack for not approaching or not initiating the calls timely, which was not at all the case. And so I did mention that on Facebook because I reached out to EFO, and I appreciate his timely response along with Chief. I just think as the public, we need to work better, right? And in terms of who is initiating those calls, but that the business people are also responding accordingly as well. And not that I'm trying to blame businesses. I just think we have sort of a break in communication, if you will. And so maybe a nice reminder, or I know that Chief had been working with Debbie Moore through the Greater Chamber, maybe another reminder in that way about if you're experiencing this is what you should be doing, kind of thing, and letting people know that, patrols out there, or a number to call if you see suspicious activity. And I know that we've been talking about that, specifically Councilor Vasquez and I and you at our mitigations subcommittee. So that's all I have really, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let me ask a question of Larry Nichols. Larry, are you still there?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So Larry, on the business registration license or business registration, I know there's just a phone number of the business, but to my knowledge, there's not like, I wonder if we could include a special number or special section says, in the event of an emergency and law enforcement needs to get a hold of you. I wonder if there's a place that that could be included. And then second, of course, then they're going to need to have access to that. That way if there's a business, they can go to it and they can pull it up and say, oh, here's an emergency contact number. That's something there? I don't think we have right now. I don't believe. I think it just has a regular phone number and stuff. But I think if it could be highlighted that, hey, this is a number here, in case of an emergency. Is that something you think that might be to look at? Possible?
Yes, Mayor and Council, for the record, Larry Nichols. Most certainly we can do that. We know we do alter and update our application sheets all the time. And I think that's something that we could do electronically through our consultant that we have that updates our records. I'll look into it for you, but I think that would be a good idea. And then perhaps we can also work with GIS folks to help the first responders, or police department, fire department, to be able to locate those addresses quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm wondering if maybe informing the public about the off hours law enforcement capability. I don't know what they're calling that program, but we did a resolution a while back on that, where it makes folks, that it gives businesses and other folks and the opportunity to have law enforcement out there so I don't know if that's something that would be helpful as well.
Yes, Mayor, Council, Larry, for the record, Larry Nichols. I'll work with the fire department, police department, and see if there's something else that we can include on information that's available to them for that.
Great. Thanks, Larry. And thanks, Mayor Pro Tem, for bringing that up and explaining that, they need to also answer their phone, or, we don't have that number. We just have an office number probably, because if I remember correctly on the business registration, just lists, what's your phone number. But if it could be highlighted emergency number, that would be great. Okay. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that I'm really, really happy about the airport becoming an enterprise, and I think that it's a good sign that everything is going well, and will actually be a money-making enterprise for the city. So kudos to Economic Department, to Andy Hume. And I would also like to share with you that I went on a ride-along with the officer assigned to District 6, Marvin Kelly. And prior to that, I met with Chief Dominguez and Deputy Chief Lieutenant Daines and Mr. Kelly, Officer Kelly, and shared my concerns about Eastlake and Hacienda Acres, that part of the city that also shares, I think, some BLM. There's a jurisdiction for BLM and the county, and the dumping that goes on and the shenanigans that go on. And they're aware of it and taking affirmative steps to rectify that situation. And in the ride along with Officer Kelly, he showed me how he works he goes down El Paseo a lot, and it's not my district, but he knows this one gentleman by the name of Robbie, who has become somewhat, I believe he's homeless. And so there's been several reports in that that shopping center where Albertsons is across from Walgreens on El Paseo. And Officer Kelly handled that situation beautifully. There was I think Albertsons thought that the manager was out there with Robbie. I think they thought that Officer Kelly was responding to a call that they might have placed, but in fact, he saw him and decided that he would actually intervene on behalf of Robbie. And the fact that he called him by his first name, I showed a lot of respect for a fellow human being. And so he wrote up a little trespass note to him and gives a copy to, and so I learned about that, the trespass thing. And gives a copy to the store, and then if he comes again, then if the owner of the establishment or manager asks that he trespassed the person, then they have to show. I don't know. There's a whole process, but anyway, it was very enlightening for me to see to be sitting in a police car, and it was the big, the big SUV. And I had to wear a bulletproof vest, and so then I wanted to go to Hacienda Acres because I hadn't seen Mr. Montoya, my dear constituent, who I met when I saw he's the gentleman whose property, the road directly in front of his house, like there's hardly any setback space between his house and the road. I mean, just like his little driveway, which maybe houses a car, and then a few steps and there's the road. And that was a road that had exposed power lines. So I didn't recognize the road because those power lines are now covered. And I spoke with David Maestas right away, and coincidentally saw him right after that. And he was surprised. Well, Mr. Montoya told me que no fue el municipio, that it wasn't the city that covered that horrible hole that was called a road. It was people who are dumping dirt there because it's cheaper to dump dirt in those spaces than it is to go pay for dumping it somewhere else. But anyway, Mr. Montoya, I hadn't seen him in over a year, and he's using a walker now, and he was actually very happy that at least he can access, his car was parked in the little carport. And anyway, so that's the story there. I'm just worried that when it rains, it's going to become a huge, huge mud hole. So I'm still worried about that, but you know, as the city says, it's private property. And as I say, well, what about condemnation or, you know, an easement and prescriptive easement? I don't know. I'm still saying I think the city can do something to make sure that those roads are paved. And since there's already a lot of dirt there, at least the city doesn't have to worry about filling it with dirt. But I just wanted to share that somewhat happy note. So my ride along, I would, you know, I hadn't been on one until I heard Councilor Abeta Stuvey and Councilor Bencomo just rave about it. And it was wonderful. And then I showed our officer that there was a area, he knew the area very, very well. He knew that everybody here, he knew personalities, he knew where this happened, that happened. But there was one road I showed him that he hadn't been down. He was really impressed that I knew that road. And I felt, you know, very proud about that. I did have my monthly meeting with, I had a meeting with Mr. Maestas and Mr. Peely when they overlapped. And that meeting was very good because Mr. Maestas was very aware of the continuing issues that I've had. And Mr. Peely is definitely aware of them. And then my last meeting was a week ago. And again, we covered some of that. But it was more like, I really wanted to get to know Mr. Peely. And I went in person and I had my mask and all of that. And he is really tall. I mean, I'm really short, so it's all relative, but he is really tall. And anyway, it was absolutely wonderful meeting him in person. And I assured him that all of our kudos to Mr. Maestas on his last day, his last meeting, did not in any way diminish the respect that we have for him, and that we hadn't, if we didn't feel the way we feel about him and how we felt about Mr. Maestas, that he wouldn't have been hired. And that wasn't something that was discussed in our session, so I figured I could state my opinion to him. So anyway, those are all I think that Councilor Abeta Stuvey will be reporting on our Las Cruces Public Schools agreement, our community schools stuff. But that's all I have for today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, wait a minute. When you went on your ride along, they had you wear a bulletproof vest?
Yes, you wear a bulletproof vest, and it was kind of big because I'm you know, it's not like I'm a little wafy, you know, little 90-pound, but because of the way I'm proportioned, it was big. And I was drenched when we got back. We were on the road for 3 hours. 3 hours. Just.
I'm just curious. I've never been given one. All my times that I go.
You don't get. This is one time you get nothing. Not even a butter and jelly sandwich.
Like usually the windows roll down too.
What? When you go? No. They're tinted windows, but it was interesting because when I got to Mr. Montoya's house, he looked kind of, and I asked him, like, what do they mean? Do you remember me? And he looked at me and he said, see, but he kept looking at Officer Kelly. But yeah, you have to ask for it, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. No. I usually get the ride with the supervisor, so I don't get to see the action you guys do. So I'm usually the we're at like the second car or third car there. Everything's already taken place. And I just get to see the remnants after that. So that's probably why I don't get one. That's okay though.
Well, that's what you get for being mayor.
No, I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Councilor Sorg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have much. I just wanted to comment on our coronavirus cases that have been going up much. Just Saturday, they hit a peak of about 67 new cases. The previous high was on Mayor Pro Tem Cassandra's birthday at 54. And I just was wondering if maybe we should have a news release cautioning people once again on the things we have to do to keep from getting the coronavirus, keep from getting this COVID-19. So that's what I'm asking, is that we just do that. And other than that, I'm good, Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Councilor. And I'm sure you were aware we were bracing for that because of the holiday that just passed. Which one was it?
Labor Day.
September, Labor Day.
Labor Day.
Yeah, we knew that it was going to be a spike, and so, but nonetheless, it doesn't hurt to just reinforce and stay the course. Councilor Bencomo.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, excuse me, Councilor Bencomo. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I forgot to mention, and I thought when you were going to talk about the parks and how, they'd be open for Halloween or something. Well, anyway, good news. LCPD on October 31 has made arrangements with the manager of the Mesilla Valley Mall to use the entire east part or a large portion of the parking lot so that kids can drive through, and then police officers will be distributing, giving them candy, I guess, presumably bags of candy or handfuls of candy. So that'll be a nice treat for kids, because I know especially Councilor Abeta Stuvey is always coming up with innovative ideas on how to make things more pleasant for kids who are so impacted by this lifestyle. So I just wanted to share that. And as soon as I get the information, I'll make sure to pass it on to everybody, and then can, post it in your social media or mailing list or whatever. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Councilor Bencomo.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I also did not get a bulletproof vest, so I don't know what that's about. But just kidding. I think I would have been even more terrified than I already was. I just have two things. I also, thanks to Councilor Sorg for bringing that up. I think, that's really one of the things I wanted to talk about was for folks to stay vigilant. It's been a pretty terrible 6 months. I think we all have pandemic fatigue, but I see people sort of just becoming more and more comfortable, and that's not a good thing. We're not out of the woods, not even close to being out of the woods. And so people just need to remain vigilant. Wear your mask. This isn't even, I was thinking yesterday about like when we first were having this debate, and it's just not even a debate anymore. Like, this is the only way we know how to slow down this virus. Wear your mask in public, wear it right. Don't wear it as a chin guard, wear it over your nose, wear it over your mouth, and as much as you can, and wash your hands, stay vigilant. I think it's really important that that we just keep reminding people. I get that it's super tough, but I would hate to go back to April, May shutdowns. And I just feel like, given flu season and everything that's coming, it's gonna happen. And I don't even care if people say that we're going to cancel Halloween this year, because you know what, there will be many more Halloweens in many other years. And so I'd rather have the city as a whole practice safer guidelines. So I'm okay with that kind of resolution, Mayor. I would support that. And I'm really concerned, given the president's current statements after his current positive diagnosis, really dismissing the severity of the issue, saying that, telling people to not be afraid, which is just completely disrespectful to 200,000 Americans who've lost their lives to COVID, to almost 900 New Mexicans that have lost their lives. And so, really want to push back against that. It's incredibly irresponsible. And so just want to remind people that this is still very serious and to just keep being careful. The other thing I wanted to say is that tomorrow is the last day to register to vote online. New Mexico, thankfully to our great Secretary of State, we have same-day voter registration in person, so you can go to your polling place and register there. But tomorrow, if you're going to do it safely, tomorrow is the last day to register online. And then, of course, encourage people to make your plan, request your absentee ballot. Those should be getting mailed out to everybody tomorrow, but you have time to request it. If not, vote early, less lines, less people, wear your mask, and vote. So thanks. That's it for me, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. And so before I get to Councilor Vasquez, so Christine, let me just clarify something. So let's just say hypothetically, the reason why what I was talking about was emergency proclamation as opposed to say a resolution, because what if this was just a spike because of Labor Day and then the numbers go down? I didn't necessarily want to do that and close down the parks and everything on Halloween Day. But and because that one's a lot quicker, because if, let's say something happens and it starts spiking, I guess my question would be is if we would have to do a resolution, and then that's at least a week to 10 days to advertise it, correct?
It would just need to be 72 hours.
No, I'm talking about an actual resolution. I mean, I got to get it on the agenda setting meeting. So that's why I was thinking I would do if I needed to, I would implement the emergency proclamation as opposed to the regular.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That was all. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, we could do it for October 19th because that's the next regular meeting, if that's something that you wanted to do, or we could have a special meeting.
Or I can just do the emergency proclamation on that Friday.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That's all. I just wanted to just double check, make sure. Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any updates today, so I'll pass.
All right. I have a steak and lobster lunch for you, gift certificate. So, Councilor Beta-Stuvey, would you like one too? No, I'm just kidding.
Don't believe him. He never delivers on that. Never.
Thank you. Yes, I do like steak. Thank you. I do have quite a few of housekeeping items with our different types of boards. We had our community schools board meeting 2 weeks ago already. We're coming up this next week. We will have another one. We worked on strategic planning and kind of just got it started into it. And then we broke down into smaller groups for our subcommittees, and we'll be reporting on those during this upcoming meeting. And after that happens, we'll probably bring a little bit more of what was brought forth in those visions of the board. We had our first quality of life PRC meeting as well last week. Sorry, I'm looking at my calendar too. And we talked about how the museum pivoted to virtual settings during the time of COVID. The issues that they had, most of it was that round of technology and adapting to be able, not only did the staff have to learn this, and they said they did it, a lot of independent learning too, with YouTube and other ways, but then how to work the items, making sure that we were bringing quality visuals as well to the public during that time. And then we also got an update from our partners in our community schools and a introduction to our coordinators at the different schools, and each one talked about how they've been able to bring resources to the community still in this time, whether it be meals, helping with technology, making sure at-risk students that needed internet assistance were able to do that. And so I do appreciate David Greenberg and all the coordinators for joining us for that meeting. And then this week we will be having our health PRC. It will be Wednesday at 3 p.m. As a reminder for Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor Flores. So I look forward to meeting with everybody. This last week, actually on Friday, I did my district tour with Mr. Peely, and he was very kind as we took, I think, 2.5 hours to go through our district in our streets and to see the different areas. One of the unique things too is we intersect county, Mesilla, just even NMSU. There's so many different pinpoints, and we literally have streets that just go back and forth with each other. And so I think that was very unique for him to see. And it brings me up to one of my next points. In our Mesilla Park area, on October 13th at 5:30 p.m., we will be having a virtual meeting with the community to discuss the Conway community trees. There are some issues over there that some are posing a danger, and then just to look at long-range planning. So hopefully have received a card indicating about this meeting and how to register online. Of course, if there are any problems or questions on registering, or if they have any questions beforehand, they can contact myself, or I believe it's CLC Engage. So that's great. And then I've already mentioned, I had it on my notes earlier, but it seemed appropriate. I was going to ask if we could have an update on all of the GO bonds as well, just to see where we're at with them, and making sure that we on many nations that we get those updates.
Oh, we lost you on
Hopefully
that.
I'm still coming.
We lost you on what your request was on the GO bond updates.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
thanks. Thank you. For our GO bond, if we could just get an update on all of the projects, see where we're at on those timelines, and sticking to the original timelines presented to the public. And if not, the concerns, issues that have been brought up, and what any sort of new timelines might look like, and how to get us, as on track as possible. And then later this week, I will be doing Open Meeting Act and IPRA Request Act training, which I'm actually, I know it may sound odd, but I'm kind of excited about to learn more about that all. And so that will be on Thursday. And I believe that is all of the updates that I have for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Let's see.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I'm sorry, Mayor. I have one more.
Oh.
The COVID. So one of the items, if people have not gotten their flu shot yet, I think it is a great time to start thinking about that. Later on the 17th, I believe they're going to start Boo to the Flus. It will be very important for our community to be protected during this time. Our whole family, we got my husband works at a hospital, so they already got theirs. The rest of us went down to a CVS, and we were in and out within about 10 minutes and got our flu shots. It's easy. You see a lot of places around in the community, and then we're going to have those Boo to the Flus later this month. And then with that in mind, it was brought up, as we see these increases in cases, there's also going to be correlations to what we see in the hospitals. I know we've been very cautious on looking at all that, and I know we haven't gotten a lot of information, but I am curious to see if we can find out how many people that we are receiving from out of county into our hospital systems. Because as we see increases not only from Doña Ana, we're also seeing those people from the outlying places. And I'm very curious to see what those impacts have had on our hospital system. And thank you, Mayor. That's all.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Mr. Ifo, you got something for us? City Manager's report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts here, a few things. First, I just wanted to make mention addressing Councilor Betastuvi's request for geo bond updates. It's brought to my attention. We do have October 12th, we have a work session. We have that scheduled for that work session to provide updates. And then I mentioned last council meeting about presenting a plan for Halloween. And, you know, it's your choice as to how you want to go about, whether it's a resolution or, but what we wanted to present is just things that they can do, you know, and to maintain the social distancing and CDC guidelines. And so I appreciate Jamie bringing this this to my attention of the things that they are preparing. I know Councilor Flores mentioned the live trunk or treat at Mesilla Valley, maintaining all the social distancing requirements. There's also Spooky Las Cruces virtual interactive and live event scheduled as well, where it's a virtual and interactive Halloween event. You know, also we want to continue to focus on pushing out the guidelines, just educate on these things. And so that's something from the staff perspective of what we need to do. And so just wanted to make mention of that. I think at the latest, as you mentioned, we'll have details on those things by October 13th. That'll be the latest that'll come out. I appreciate as well the opportunity to meet with all of you. I appreciate the tours so far. Mayor Pro Tem Gandara and Councilor Betastuvi, thank you for taking the time. I know the rest of you, we're all scheduled. Looking forward to that as well. But there's nothing like actually going out with each of you, and so I can hear it from your mouth while seeing actually having the visual in front of me to know what your needs are. And so I've made notes. In fact, before we've even gone on the tours, I know you've mentioned these needs, but again, it was nice to see those visuals. So I'm looking forward to going with all of you. I think I've seen all of you in person now as of last week. And I know you're thinking I'm bigger in person. I'm thinking you're all smaller in person. So in the middle of my meeting with Councilor Flores, it was funny. She just, in mid-sentence, she looked down at my feet and she says, "Oh my gosh, how big are your feet?" And so it's size 15. If anybody is wondering, I wear size 15 shoes. But I really enjoy those meetings as well, getting to know you better, and I look forward to many more. I'm also taking tours with our staff, and each department's making my way through each department. I happened to go out with Parks and Rec this morning. I will say they got a lot going on. As with one thing I know about most Parks Department, there's nobody in the city that works harder. I know they're always overworked and underfunded. And so I really appreciate all that they're doing, looking at all the projects they have before them. I also got some information from our community development that I want to make note of. I appreciate Larry providing this information to me. But it's interesting because we are in the middle of this pandemic. And, we thought about, we look at the GRT and the decline is less than we predicted, but we don't know all the impact. We know that there are still struggling companies out there, businesses, people, but this is some glimmer of hope, I believe, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But some of the facts that he presented to me, permits issued is up by 19% within the last year. 39% residential valuations, 343 new business registrations. And so these are things that really interesting. I can't say that I know exactly what that means, but what I do know is that we're busy. And and think about community development when you have building permits and you have business registrations. That's an indicator of activity throughout the whole entire city. So that affects the meters that are being set in utilities. That affects those that frequent our roads. It's just busy, and I think that's a good sign. I think it's a good sign that there's movement in our economy, and so hopefully that means we continue to get through this. So just wanted to mention that. And along with that, with community development, give a shout out to the department and the planning. I believe they received Elevate Las Cruces comprehensive plan, received first place in the area of long range planning category from the APA New Mexico chapter, and also first place in the active transportation plan, excellence in public engagement. So just wanted to point that out, give kudos there. Also wanted to plug, again, economic development. I appreciate the work Griselda, Elizabeth Teeters have done in the launching our business retention and expansion program. Sitting in on that, I realized how many resources there are for businesses in the city, both within the city and also all the groups that are working together to help bring prosperity to our business community. So I just wanted to plug that in and continue to share what's available for them. I think a couple more things. Yesterday, had the opportunity for the first time to see our Veterans Memorial Park. It's amazing. The only thing I've seen close is when I went to DC. I haven't seen that anywhere before. It's really a sacred park. You can certainly feel that there. But I appreciate the recognition they give our firefighters, fallen firefighters yesterday, and all the work that both the Parks Department and the Veterans Advisory Board do to keep that park up. And then I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm far past the steak and lobster dinner, but maybe a peanut butter jelly sandwich. But the community, just a couple of internal happenings that I just want to make you aware of. We've rerouted all communication to the media to our communications department. That's just an internal for staff. Of course, you do as you please, but for staff, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. And I don't really care to give approvals for those. I'd rather give it to the experts and have them give the nod and maybe quarterback that for us. And so I've asked all staff, any inquiries, even myself, before I respond, I will get approval from our communications department. And so we're all on the same page, all asking, answering the same way, but not necessarily coming to me for approvals or my ACMs for approval, but going through the proper channel of the experts in our organization. I've noticed, in the past with previous councils that I work with, it's been a good tool for even council and the mayor to kind of, you can push that off and let them screen it, and then you can do as you may. But just wanted to let you know about that policy that just came out today. And, just an update on, I know there's a lot of interim positions, vacancies that we're working through. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, you'll see some of these positions filled. That's our goal. We want to get everybody filled, put in place, and ready to roll. I think we don't have a lot of time to waste in those areas. We got so much going on in every aspect of the city, as you know. So just wanted to give you an update there. Thank you, Mayor, Council, for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Ifo. Looks like we may have some comments here. Councilor Flores, do you have your hand up? Was that an accident?
Yes, that was an accident. I'm sorry.
Councilor Beta Stuvey, accident or true?
No, true. Thank you. I'm gonna stop my video so that you can hear me. I forgot to mention during our ride along with Mr. Peely, we actually ended up helping a constituent, and I think it just shows his investment to the community and everything. We were driving along in one of my neighborhoods, and there was a very elderly looking woman, and she was very nice, but she had a very large pair of pruning shears, and she was on top of a very rickety looking ladder, and both of us kind of looked at each other and we said we need to stop. So we ended up having a wonderful conversation with some neighbors. He introduced himself, asked the constituents had questions for him about different things. So it was a wonderful way, just to connect, but it also shows that, he's willing to help anyone in need. So I found that very nice. And so, yeah, thank you.
So did Ifo just break the limb off, or did he actually trim it?
She was, her husband came out and he was very much taller than she was and said he would help, but she was insistent at first to try to get it.
Okay.
I was afraid that I'd break the ladder if I stood on it. So I'm glad he came out.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that O-line trying to block you. I don't know how many sacks you had, but yeah. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Gandara.
Thanks, Mayor. Ifo reminded me about the tour, and so did Councilor Beta Stuvey. We had a great time, but we're not finished. An hour was just not enough time. We did our best, but we left a few places that I really wanted to show him. But it was awesome to talk about history, and I have quite a few historic districts in my district, and I think he definitely was impressed with just the vastness, uniqueness to the original town site. And then, when you went up to the Three Crosses area, west on Elks, just very, very different. And so I appreciated his time. He made mention of the fallen veterans, the fallen first responders, I guess. And I wanted to ask Mayor publicly if we could get some connections with the Veterans Board specific to our suicide prevention task force. I think it's always important and something that we have had limitations in having a veteran sit in our task force. I've been working a couple of years trying to have emphasis specifically on our veterans, and we were able to get Sergeant Major Fisk's story, and he was really interested in sitting on our task force, but we have a Veterans Board that I think could easily influence in that area. And so I think there just needs to be a connection. So I'm not sure how you want me to proceed, but I'd love to continue to get to seek representation where the veterans are concerned, because It's a huge problem. Suicide is a huge problem in our veteran population. And coming up, Mayor, next year in 2021, we're going to be doing a summit and veteran issues along with youth to include our elderly are going to be 3 focal points related to suicide. And so if you can help me navigate or someone tell me how they want me to address our Veterans Board, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. If you just email Chief Enriquez, he's my liaison to the Veterans Advisory Board, and of course, copy EFO, and I think they can arrange that. So you were looking to maybe have a veteran, see if you could find a veteran who would serve on your board? Is that what you're thinking?
On the task force, yes.
I think that's a great idea. Okay. Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, if there's nothing further, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second by Flores.
Okay, motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, second by Councilor Flores, that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, we're adjourned. It's 4:55 p.m. Thank you.